Hello, everyone. Nice to see you on my channel, Touching Stories. Today you will hear an amazing story that is based on real events. It's a drama that will be a very important lesson for everyone.
Betty, let's dance, Oliver called out to the girl. There was dancing in the village tonight. No, she looked at everyone who was here and was very surprised at how everything was going on in the village. What are you? So unsociable. He was wooing her. Normal, unlike you. She looked around at the people who were here. Oh, here we go, city bimbos. The young man snorted and stepped away from her. It was a hot summer, but Betty disliked this time of year so much. Every time she and her parents came here to help her grandmother dig the vegetable garden, plant potatoes and other crops. She was born into an ordinary family. They lived in the city, but not so long ago her parents came here from the village. Father and mother worked at the factory. At first they, like many workers of this institution, lived in the dormitory which was provided to them. But after a few years, when Betty started first grade, they got their own place. So are we going? Dad asked on a hot June afternoon. Again, Betty grimaced. She did not understand how to live in the village. There is a private house, animals constantly unpleasant smell, and even a toilet outside. You what? We were born there with mother, all roots there. Did not understand her reluctance, father. Can I stay here somehow? Asked the girl. At that time she was only 10 years old, and of course her parents could not leave her alone. What do you think you're doing? The man was getting angry. They got into the car, and as every time drove down the route familiar to everyone. Betty sat in the back seat. She folded her arms across her chest, frowning. Daughter, look out the window, how beautiful it is, her mother told her. I don't see anything beautiful, Betty muttered to herself under her nose. But she still squinted. All around, the forest was replaced by a field, and in the distance, at the horizon, there was something unusual. The rich colors of summer were very eye-catching, but the girl was not interested. And so today she was here again at her grandmother's house. When she came here as a child, she liked to run barefoot on the grass, splashing in the old tin bathtub, which then still alive grandfather put out on the street and poured water into it. Neighborhood girls and boys would run around the fence, calling her to come with them, and she would run with them. Right now, though, she didn't want to hang out with anyone. Betty couldn't wait until they were back in town again and their normal, ordinary life began. Look at the goose grandmother cooked. Her mother tried to entice her. I don't want any goose, the daughter turned away, showing that this life was not for her. In the evening they went to bed, and in the morning when the rooster sang, the grandmother woke everyone up. Before the heat rises, we must work, the woman said. Do I have to go too? Betty raised her head. And how did you want? You like to eat cucumbers, tomatoes in winter, and you think where they come from, smiled Grandma. Well, she got up, and as she was in her nightgown, so she went out into the garden. She did it deliberately. She knew that the mistress would not approve of it and would chase her away. That's all Betty wants. She'll go back to the house and sleep again. What's the matter with you? Grandmother would grumble at once. It's so hot outside. What difference does it make what you work in? Looked her granddaughter at her. Either go change or, the woman did not finish. Betty did not need to persuade. She put the puller to the fence and headed towards the house. When she entered the cool room, she plopped down on the bed. That was all her work for the day. The grandmother reproached her daughter and son-in-law. Nothing, she is still young. She will grow up and realize that all this is not for nothing. The father stood up for his daughter. When all the work was done, the family returned to town. Betty was glad of that. Here the first thing she did was to go to the bathroom, draw some water, and lie down in it. The girl from childhood wanted to be different from her village acquaintances. She sat down in front of the mirror, put her hair in a tight bundle. She would put on some strict dress, arrange her toys in front of her, and begin to instruct them. Betty imagined herself as some kind of boss. Now she was 15 and they were back in the village. Today, she had decided to show these uncouth rednecks what a girl should look like. The local girls came to the dance in colorful dresses, with braids like cowlicks on their heads. Betty, on the other hand, walked down the village road with her head held up proudly. On her feet she wore lacquered loafers with a small heel, neat white socks with ruffles. a strict suit that her mother had made her out of her own, a narrow skirt, blouse, and jacket. The girl herself thought she looked 100%. Everyone was already on the dance floor when she got up there. That's when Oliver noticed her and came up. Wow, the guy whistled. He was determined to get the girl by all means. And then he asked her to dance, but she ignored him. Why are you like this? He couldn't understand when he approached her again. You don't need to come near me. She shunned him like the plague, as if she was afraid of getting infected. Selena, look what this bimbo wants here. She's all dressed up. All the guys are looking at her, Katie said to her friend. I see they were standing and looking in the direction where Betty was standing. Selena was an authority in the village. Lots of girls asked her for advice. Guys were friends with her. No one ever dared to say anything bad to the girl. And then this city girl shows up and starts making eyes at her. Selena couldn't let that go. When Betty realized that the last dance was over, she decided it was time for her to go home. She was already downstairs and heading towards her house when she was blocked by a crowd of girls. What do you want? Betty stopped. What do you want here? Selena asked right away. Just came to visit my grandmother to help her. The girl was telling the truth. Yeah, did she come to see her grandmother or to get our guys off her back? Said Katie. What are you talking about? She was trying to keep up appearances. I'll show you. Selena came at her. Betty felt her skirt go up at the seams. She had never been in a fight, so now she was just covering herself with her hands. That's it. She's had enough. Stop everyone. Katie stopped everyone. Betty was lying on the ground. Her clothes were torn and dusty. Her hair was disheveled and now sticking out in different directions. She got up and walked toward the house. Her knees were sore and she felt that they were broken. What happened? She saw her mother walking towards her. Nothing. She tried to walk faster to her room to change. Her mother and father looked at each other. They themselves knew that in the village the locals were not to be trifled with. But no one had expected their daughter to get into such a situation. Mom, I want to get out of here, screamed the next day Betty. A couple more days and we'll be in town, she promised her. I don't want to wait any more days, the girl cried. But you'll have to, her father told her. These days Betty decided to spend at home, so she wouldn't run into any more of these chanthropes. So she did. Watched what her parents and grandmother were doing in the vegetable garden. She could just go out in the yard and sit and enjoy the fresh air. Betty, go to the store, her grandmother asked her. I don't want to. In fact, she was afraid to go outside. Yes, let it go, she admitted. She was weak and couldn't answer to these girls. But Betty didn't want to be strong because she wanted something else out of life. And you don't want to. Grandma looked at her sternly. All right, took Betty the bag, money, and went out the gate. Hello, Oliver was waiting outside the gate, scaring her. What are you doing here? Betty was shaking inside. Let's go for a ride. He turned around and there was a moped by the fence. I'm not going anywhere with you. Betty turned around and wanted to go, but she saw the girls coming from the other side of the store. So, what's up? He held her hand. What the girl wanted most of all now was to go back inside the gate, to be home again. But she couldn't break free. Okay, let's go. At that moment, Betty didn't even think of anything bad the young man could do to her. He got on the moped. Betty got in the back. They rattled past the girls with just anger on her face. The girl thought he would take her to the end of the village and there they would stop. But Oliver didn't think about that. He turned onto a path that led to the forest. Well, look, first you have to look closely at the fungus, Oliver saw. Where Betty is looking, he stood up, took out a knife and cut the mushroom. Show me, now it's getting interesting for some reason. It's a good mushroom, he showed her. And the bad one. She couldn't wait to hear the story of the greaves. Look, almost all greaves have a skirt under the cap, and also towards the end of the stem is a little thickened. If you turn the fungus over, you'll see that there are thin plates at the bottom of the cap. This is common with greaves. You can also cut off the stem, continued to tell the young man. Already more interesting, the girl began to smile. Yeah, I read a book on how to survive in the forest if you get lost. You can eat herbs, roots, berries, but you just need to know what you can eat and what not. There are also mushrooms that can be eaten raw. To gather water, you can carefully collect dew. If you're lucky and there's a fire, you can sleep not on the ground, but to make an interesting construction, He looked to see if Betty was listening to him or not. Well, what kind of construction is it? She was interested. You make a fire, and when it burns out, you gather thick boards or branches, and then lay them on stones or on each other so that you get a well over the coals. Lie down, warm and dry, Oliver said. Have you ever tried it yourself? Betty wondered. No, only read, he sighed. I see. Only the girl began to wonder how the guy disappointed her. Well, are you bored? He moved closer to her. I thought you were telling me things you tried yourself, and so she waved her hand, stood up, and went to pick some flowers. Oliver drove Betty home again today, and they agreed to meet again. The girl entered the house. Her family looked at her, smiling. Today she was not with knockers, but with flowers. Well, did you find a suitor? Mom asked. No, it's just like that. The girl was sure of it. Yeah, look, as if you don't have to stay here. Mom shook her head. What are you talking about? The girl was even scared. Just kidding, we'll go home soon, her mother told her. Hurry up, Betty told her. Even though she liked hanging out with Oliver, it still wasn't what she was used to. They were in town in a couple of days, just as her parents had promised. At first, Betty was excited about it, but when school was a week away, she started to miss it. She herself didn't know why she wasn't having so much fun. And anyway, if anything, why would one be bored? But thinking about Oliver made her sad. So ready for the new school year? Her father sat down next to her. Of course she was. She looked up at him and smiled. She couldn't wait for it all to start, to break the boredom. Hey, how was your summer? Her friend Tanya asked Betty. Normal, answered her girl. Were you in the village again? Her friend guessed. Yeah, the girl nodded her head. Will you at least tell me how it is there and what? Tatiana asked repeatedly. What to tell you? If you were there, you would see that there live inadequate people. Betty did not really want to tell her friend that this summer she had happened there, that she met a guy, even though she'd known him before, and that now she was really bored without him, without this stupid, she thought, stories. So, what's the matter with you hanging up your nose again? Betty came home and her mother saw how sad she was. You're imagining things, the girl said. So tell me, do you miss Oliver? A woman sat down with her. How did you know? The daughter looked at her mother. How could you not guess? You think I wasn't in love? Her mother told her. And when after 2 weeks Betty came home from school, her mother met her in the hallway. Well, darling, dance, she waved the letter. Who was it from? The girl wondered. And you guess? Mother smiled enigmatically and closed her eyes. Did Oliver really write it? The girl could not believe that it could be. Will you dance? Her mother asked her again. Come on. She twirled her legs a little on the spot. Here, her mother gave it to her, and Betty immediately ran to her room. She printed out the letter. It was really from Oliver. What he had written to her. The young people were practically 16 years old, and Oliver had told her how beautiful and interesting she was, and how much fun he had with her, and all the rest. Betty read the letter and her face burned. She imagined if the guy had said it out loud into her eyes, she probably wouldn't have been able to stand it and would have laughed or just run away. Then they had dinner in the kitchen. The mother looked back and forth at her father and daughter. Ariana, why are you so mysterious today? Her husband asked her. Did you know that our daughter received a letter today? The mother asked her husband a question. Yes, from whom? The father turned to Betty. Mom looked at her daughter. Come on, Mom, it's so beautiful, first relationship. It's all good, she told her. Still, Betty lowered her eyes. What, are you going to write him back? The parents were interested in everything to do with their daughter. I haven't decided yet. The girl finished her dinner and went to her room. She didn't know what to do now. What if Oliver, along with his friends, got together and he wrote her a letter to make fun of her? Or the girls had written on Oliver's behalf. She just didn't know what to think. But when a week had passed, she made up her mind, sat down, and wrote to him. In her letter, Betty told him how she'd spent the rest of the summer, how she'd gone to school, and how boring the place was. When she had been in the village and thought it was bad there, she had been very wrong about that. A week later, she got a letter from Oliver again. And now, without thinking, she went to the post office and mailed her letter. So the two young people began to correspond. There was nothing much to write, so they mostly described the nature, how it was now on the street, studies, and everything else. Well, did I see that you corresponded? The mother asked her daughter. Yes, she didn't lie. And what does he write? The woman was interested. Invites me to New Year's Eve to celebrate together, said quietly Betty. So, of course, go, and grandmother from us congratulate, and yourself meet a friend. The mother even wanted it. Okay, I'd already thought about it, and I know I'll go, said Betty. Now the mother and father saw that their daughter had grown up. She was already thinking about boys, and they were texting. And when the New Year's vacation came, the father took the girl to her grandmother in the village. Hi, Grandma. She came in to see her. Oh, granddaughter, why didn't you warn me? I wasn't expecting, she replied. And how would we have warned you? By carrier pigeon? Her son asked her. Yes, well, come in. Always glad to children and grandchildren, smiled grandmother. So just to drink tea, and went back, said the man. And you? Grandma looked at her granddaughter. And I'll stay for the New Year's vacation, Betty smiled. Okay, the grandmother went, put the kettle on. She set something on the table, and when the tea was finished, the father left the house, got in the car, and drove back. Well, tell me, squinted and looked at her granddaughter. What is there to tell? Betty didn't understand. How was that what? Every summer when you came to me, you all moaned, saying that you do not like it here, and now, all of a sudden, you came yourself, and for the whole vacation. The woman shook her head. Well, grandmother did not want her granddaughter to molest her. What do you mean, grandmother? She said and sat down on a chair. Yes, we correspond with Oliver. As summer began to communicate, I realized that I am interested in this guy. He texted me first, and I texted him back, and that's how it started. Now he invited me to New Year's Eve to celebrate it together, said Betty. Well, wow, my granddaughter has grown up, rejoiced grandmother. On December 31st, the woman set the table. They sat for a while. Oliver came to take her home, but no one would let them go. You first sit here, congratulate me, and I'll congratulate you, and then you can go. At midnight, their grandmother told them, all right, we'll sit here for sure. The young people didn't want to offend her. And indeed, they sat at the table for a couple of hours. Oliver was telling stories again, all about nature, about animals, about how he practiced with them at home. You can't imagine, my mother bought 4 rabbits, and that was in the summer, and now we have an incredible number of them. Oliver laughed and told the story. Hey, threatened grandmother with her finger. And when all the presents were given, congratulations were said, and at 12:30, the young people went to Oliver's parents. They too were glad to meet the girl. They sat at the table for a while. The parents of the guy even offered to taste champagne, but Betty blushed and refused. She was very embarrassed in front of the adults. And then the young man went to walk her home. They stood near her gate for a long time. Go on, come on, it's getting very late, Betty told him. See you tomorrow. He came up and kissed her on the cheek. Oliver, she burst out. But the boy walked on, didn't look back. He was even a little amused. And the next day, Oliver and Betty went for a walk in the village. If I ask you something now, will you not be offended and run away from me? I hope not, she answered him. If I asked you to date, would you agree? Oliver said uncertainly. I think we can try. Betty didn't refuse him because she had already realized once that she was really bored without this friend. Shall we go to the disco tonight? He asked her. No, Selena is there and I don't want to meet her. Betty shook her head. Come on, you're with me now. I won't let anyone hurt you, he told her. Let's just go for a walk or go somewhere else. We can go to my grandmother's. I have my own room there to sit, Betty suggested. Okay, I'll see you tonight, Oliver agreed. So they met at her house and then at his. And then the vacation was over and she had to go back to the city. Right, Oliver told her. You too? She was almost at the foot of the bus, but she got down, walked over to him, and kissed him on the cheek, and he held her close for a few seconds. Now Betty had no other thoughts, only of the young man. She dreamed of how things might be, what kind of husband he would be, what kind of children they would have, where they would live, and everything else. Slowly the girl studied until the summer vacation, and on the first day she began to ask her parents to go to the village. Wow, I never would have thought that our Betty would ask to go where she couldn't be dragged on a rope before, laughed her father. Of course, not that very day, but a little later they took again. New Year's Eve they celebrated together. In the summer, when Betty came to the village after graduation, they never parted at all, walking as if glued to each other. And in the fall, when school started, Betty asked her father to take her to the village. "What about your studies?" Her parents didn't understand. "Mom, Dad, what study? My beloved is going to serve. And you are talking about some study." She looked at them. Then the father understood everything. He made concessions and took his daughter to the village. Oliver left. Betty stayed behind. She came home, cried for a long time. Her mother soothed her, said that time would pass quickly. You just have to wait. And indeed, time passed quickly. The girl wrote letters every day. Of course, back received not so often. She thought that the guy there is just no time, but still there were letters. She studied, as if everything was fine. New Year's Eve passed, and at the end of January, when the family was sitting at the table and celebrating a holiday, Betty suddenly threw up. "What is it?" Her mother turned to her. "I don't know," she replied. "Are you sure you don't know?" The mother was shocked. "Yes, I might be pregnant, but it's not certain," Betty told her. "What do you mean it's not certain? Tomorrow morning you get ready and we're going to the doctor," her mother told her. No matter how much the girl cried, no matter what she told her mother, she didn't want to hear anything. Only abortion, nothing else. "Mom, how can you kill your own child?" Betty cried. "I don't know anything. You have your whole life ahead of you. If you don't study now, you'll ruin your young years. He'll come back. It's not clear whether he'll stay with you or not." I said abortion, so it will be abortion. She didn't want to hear any arguments. At first, Betty didn't want to write to Oliver about it, but then she decided that it wouldn't be fair on her part, and also that the guy would just support her. How painful and unpleasant it was. After that, the girl shoved herself away. She did not go anywhere, did not communicate with anyone, wrote letters in which she complained to Oliver about her fate and waited for him. Betty had graduated from college, and now she could go to work as an accountant. Oliver, though he hadn't studied anywhere, went to work at the factory. They promised him evening courses, which he was going to take. "Hello." A young girl entered the office, where almost all the women over 40 were sitting. "Oh, new girl, come in." They greeted her in a strange way. Betty started working in the finance department. At first, she didn't know or understand anything at all, but in time she began to get involved in the work. Many people reproached her, made remarks, but the boss, who was at that time, always called Betty to her office and told her not to pay attention to anyone. Everyone wants to pull the blanket over himself, and having done bad to his neighbor, thinks that he will do better only to himself, the woman often said. That's why Betty didn't pay attention to anyone. One day she came home from work and her husband was in the kitchen. "Oh, Oliver, hi. Why are you sitting here? Where are your parents?" She came in. "I want to talk to you," he told her. "Yes, I'm listening to you. Just let me put the kettle on." She quickly poured water, put it on the gas, and sat opposite. "We have already lived with you for 5 years, and still no children are not planned." "Answer me," he asked her. "Oliver, well, wait a bit. Maybe the climate isn't right, or maybe it's just a matter of time," she told him calmly. "What time?" He jumped up from the table. 5 years is not time," shouted the husband at his wife, as if someone evil had possessed him. "What are you so angry about?" She didn't understand. "And the fact that your mother could not forbid. Where would I go? Would have returned from the army, would have taken you and the child. You should not have done this abortion. Now because of him you cannot have children," shouted at his wife Oliver. Betty sat there crying. It was the first time she had seen her husband in such a state. "Calm down, please," she pleaded with him, but Oliver had no intention of doing so. Tonight he had gone out. Betty waited for him for a long time, but when it was well past midnight, she just went to bed. In the morning, her mom came in. "Are you asleep?" she asked her. "No," answered Betty and looked at her with eyes red with tears. "What happened at your place last night?" The woman was curious, for she and her father had heard the young ones fighting, so they did not leave the room. "I don't know what came over him." The girl shrugged. She really didn't know anything. "Where did he spend the night?" The mother wondered. "Mom, well, I don't know. He left and slammed the door. That's all. Nothing else," continued to cry Betty. "I see. Left Mom to her room." Betty showed that the woman said it as if she understood everything. She started to get ready for work, and when she got there, she was met at the very door by Naomi. They were sitting in the same office, but since she was here waiting for her, she had something to say. Betty finally grabbed her hand by the woman's arm and took her aside a little. "What's the matter?" the girl asked her. "Quiet." She looked around to make sure no one was around. "Good," nodded Betty. "Could your husband be seeing the girl off this morning?" she asked her. "Walking her where?" Betty didn't understand, because he had to go to work today too. "I don't know, to see her off, not to see her off, but to go to work together, for example," Naomi asked. I don't know what to answer. Everything shook inside Betty. She was both nervous and afraid, all her feelings mixed up inside. "So are you going to remain silent?" the woman asked her. "What can I tell you if I really don't know?" Tears were coming to her eyes, and it seemed to Betty that she was about to cry. "So listen, I ran into Oliver today on my way to work. I couldn't have been mistaken, it was him. But there was a young woman next to him," Naomi began to say. "That's enough. I'd had enough of this." Betty turned around and walked towards the offices. "What an idiot," said her senior colleague after her. Today, Betty waited until the end of the working day. She rushed home, but her husband wasn't there yet. "What's wrong?" her mom asked her. "Today at work they told me that Oliver is cheating on me. She didn't hide anything from her mother." "Do you think it's true?" The woman was wary. "I don't know what to think. I just want to ask him. For as long as we've been together, there's never been any lying between us, no bad relationship. And I think that if I ask, he will definitely tell me," Betty said naively. Her mother only shook her head. Finally, Oliver returned. He saw that the whole family was gathered and they were sitting in the kitchen. He realized something had happened. "So tell me," he went in there. "Tell me one thing, is it true or not?" She raised her head. "Yes," he nodded, realizing what he was talking about. "Why?" It was a reasonable question from his wife. "Betty, I want children. Lust is pregnant. She will bear me a healthy child. I will have heirs. I will have something to live for. Not just like this," he answered her. "Ah, is that so?" Now Ariana rose from her seat. She realized in whose vegetable garden the stone flew. "Mom, sit down, please. Everything that has already happened, it will not return. So why waste nerves? If he has found another and she has fallen in love with him, and especially if she is about to give birth, or is it not so?" Looked Betty at her husband again. "Don't start, please," he told her and went to pack his things. After that, it was a long divorce procedure. At work, Betty went to work as if she had been drowned in water. She didn't understand anything, couldn't do anything. It got to the point where her boss called her in one day. "Betty, do you realize what's going on? If you continue like this, we'll probably have to say goodbye to you," the woman told her. "No, it's all good now." BT promised her that she would do well from now on. Now that it had been a few years since she had been placed here, she was in a pretty good position, even though she had started out as a simple technician. Knock, 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 hello. A young man came into the office. "Hello," looked at him interested colleagues. "And I'm here to see you," the new guy said, John, and entered the office. Wow, what young people have already started to hire, began to judge among themselves senior colleagues. "Don't listen to them," said Betty. "All right, I'm here on assignment. My name is John. I hope we will work well together, and I will stay here for a long time," said the new employee. "Hi, John. My name is Betty Petrovna. I've been working here for more than 7 years, and if you have any questions, be sure to contact me. I will always help you," smiled Betty to him. She liked such young and active. "Thank you." He glanced at the women who were sitting and murmuring. From that moment on, Betty was like John's guardian angel. She helped him with everything, advised him on everything. If there was a wrong report or any flaws, she corrected everything and explained everything to the young man. "How can you do that?" He was always surprised by her. "It's okay. You'll work for another year, and you'll be able to do the same," she said calmly to him. "Why do you bother with him?" Her colleagues didn't understand her. "Well, why, I came here once just like you. You helped me. When you were just out of school, you probably had help too," the woman told them. John did his best. He obeyed all of Betty's instructions. He was praised by his superiors, and he was moving up the career ladder. Mom, hi, I'm home. Betty came home from work. Hi. There was a woman standing in the hallway. What's wrong with you? Betty didn't understand when she saw the look on the woman's face. Oliver's dead, the woman told her. His wife had just had a baby. Betty was stunned at the door. I don't know, a colleague at work today said he lost control of his car and hit an oncoming car, the mother said. Do you need any help? Betty was worried, even though they hadn't parted well, and it was all Oliver's fault. But now that he had a small child and needed a lot of things, she was willing to help in any way she could. No one called, no one said anything, Ariana said. I'll call myself then. She opened the phone book, found the number, and dialed it. Hello, this is Betty, Oliver's ex-wife. She spoke into the receiver. Then she was silent for a long time, listening to what she was going to say. I understand. Only heard the mother, the words of her daughter. Well, what did they tell you? The woman asked. That they don't want anything from me, and they won't take handouts, smiled Betty. That's fine, I don't insist, she shrugged. Then Betty wanted to go to Oliver's funeral, but she hadn't decided to, because when they talked to his current wife, she'd felt a lot of negativity from the woman. Not going, her mother asked her. I won't go, she shook her head. Betty continued to work. She raised the department because she was already the head of it and continued to support John in everything. And he, thanks to Betty, was following in her footsteps. First, he became the lead specialist, then the head specialist, and soon she was prophesying that he'd move up to her position. Oh, come on, Betty, you've got a lot of sitting around to do. He was uncomfortable with her talking about him like that. No way, she waved her hand and laughed. It had been years since Oliver had left her, but she was still alone, because she knew she'd never find anyone like him anywhere else. Betty, why don't we go to the village? Her father suggested it one evening. What would we do there? She didn't understand. She was already a little over 40. Her grandmother was long gone. So now, who is there? What we'll do? She did not even know. And what should we do there? We'll come, clean up everything, see what condition the house is in, fix it up, and maybe it will be our country dacha, her parents told her. You know what? I probably agree. How long has it been since we've been there? She looked at her mother. Well, how long since my grandmother's funeral? It's been practically 9 years. Here, it's been 7 years since we've been there, Ariana squinted. Well, tomorrow I'll ask if they'll give me a vacation, and we'll definitely go there with you, her daughter promised them. First thing in the morning, she didn't sit down at her desk to start doing her morning report, but went to her boss's office. Yes, of course, Betty, why else would you ask? Remember the last time you were on a full vacation, then you'd leave? They'd call you in for one thing, and you'd always respond, always show up. And now, if you need to go somewhere, please, no pity, write an application and go. Put a piece of paper in front of her boss. Thank you very much, Betty answered her. She wrote the application, came home in the evening, told her parents that she was ready to go to the village. They packed everything they needed, set off. Do you think nobody broke into the house? The father asked the family. Come on, there are neighbors there. The mother didn't think anyone would do such a thing. Well, yes, I also think that the neighbors would have stopped these attempts, agreed with her husband. And there they were. Betty watched the whole thing. She'd seen it many times before, but it didn't seem the same. Like the fence was taller and the house was bigger. And there was a beautiful front garden, and now there were branches growing there. There are no young people walking the streets. They're all grown up. Val, have you fallen asleep? Her father turned to her. Ah, no, now she looked back at him. They all went into the house together and saw that indeed, almost the whole porch was rotten. In some places, even a foot was falling through. The doors needed to be replaced too. In the yard, everything is neglected. What to speak about the vegetable garden? So I suggest we have a cleanup day. We'll split up. Some of us will go to the vegetable garden. Some of us will do the house. Some of us will clean up inside the house. So who's in favor? Who's against? Dad's looking at everyone. I'm in favor. There's nothing to do anyway, said Ariana. I'm in too, said Betty, and they decided not to put it off. They poured water into buckets and armed themselves with rags, mops, and brooms. First, Ariana and her mother swept everything out of the house, dusted everywhere, washed and cleaned everything. Her father had to fix everything now, and then they could clean it up and rewash it. "Are you going to the garden now?" Ariana asked her daughter. Yes, she nodded. It was done quickly there too. Some of it they ripped out by hand, some they mowed, some they cut. By the end of the evening, all three of them were very tired, but when they saw what they had done in that time, they liked it all very much. Why wasn't this place like this before? Finally, Betty voiced her thoughts out loud. It wasn't like this, it was like this. "I was born and nothing has changed," her father told her. "It seems to me that everything is different. The house is different, the gate is different. The yard is different, the garden is different too." Betty curled her fingers. "Let's go to dinner. I've got a goose in the oven," Mom said. I hope the goose is still as good as it was." Betty remembered how her grandmother used to cook it. They sat down at the table, ate dinner, and started talking about who was staying, how much, and what they were going to do here. "So do you want to stay here for your whole vacation?" Betty's father asked. I wish she smiled because she realized how she had answered that question before and how she was talking about it now. "I don't mind at all, the fresh air, the forest, the river, it will all do you good," the man told her. She and her mother were going to stay here for 2 or 3 more days and then drive back. Now, when they helped her father make the porch the next day, it seemed as if there was no debris at all, no weeds, as if someone had left the house yesterday and they had arrived today. Mom was making dinner again, and Betty decided at that moment to go to the vegetable garden and dig up some soil, make some beds, and plant something so that the soil wouldn't go to waste. "Oh, I realize what's happening to our daughter," Ariana said out loud. "What's going on with her?" Her father didn't understand. "Well, first of all, she is over 40, and secondly, with age comes a craving for the land, and if before she did not even want to talk about it, but now look, she dug the ground herself." They stood near the gate to the vegetable garden and discussed it. "I can hear everything," Betty told them. "And we don't hide anything from you," laughed the parents. After that, as agreed, the parents stayed here for the next 2 days and then left. Betty had another month or so to go, and she wasn't going back to the city. She liked it here now. She dug in the vegetable garden, then she stoked the bathhouse, put a cot outside, and could lie down half the day, read a book, and sunbathe. One day she went to the river and saw that a building was being erected near the village council, all enclosed by a fence. It was unclear what was going to be there. "What is being built here?" she asked a woman who was passing by. "Yes, they decided to open a dairy farm that will make cheese, cottage cheese, milk." She waved her hand. "Why so uncertain? Don't you believe in them?" Betty asked. "I don't even know." The woman shrugged her shoulders and walked past. Betty wondered. She turned toward the village hall, went inside. There were a lot of people there, so she didn't wait. She walked, went to the fence where the construction was going on, looked inside. There were a lot of workers there. Of course, Bea wasn't sure of that, but it seemed to her that they were all commuters. She saw one of the workers turn toward her. Betty immediately hid behind the fence and walked onto the river where she was going. There she walked on the water for a while. After spreading out a towel, laid down on the sand, but it was not as comfortable here as it was in her backyard. Then the woman made up her mind and walked back. When she passed by the construction site again her interest was greater than anything else, so she approached the gate again. Betty saw men on a fire in some kind of vat, boiling something. Now she couldn't resist going inside. "Hello, what are you building here?" she asked them, just as she had asked the woman. They repeated word for word what the woman had told them. "I see. But why don't people believe you?" She couldn't understand. "Well, this is their problem. Why don't they believe us? We will build it, we will leave, and other people will work." The workers answered her. "And what do you have here?" Betty nodded at a vat of some kind of balanchine. One of the workers opened the lid and stirred the contents of the vat. "You can't eat this stuff. You can only feed it to pigs," she grumbled. Pigs, they give us cereals, bread, stew, canned fish. But where to cook?" "Only here," they answered. "Well, we'll think of something," said the woman, and with a confident gait went to the chairman. The place was still crowded, but Betty didn't linger. She walked straight to the door. Even though she'd heard shouts from behind her, she knocked anyway and opened the door. "I don't have time." He looked at her. "I'll just be a few minutes," said Beatty, and confidently closed the door and sat down in a chair. "Hello, who are you anyway?" the chairman asked her. "You may remember, I used to have a grandmother who used to live here," she told him, wearing her name. "Ah, Betty, wow, what a grown-up. She got so funny that she was so old and she was still Betty." "So Harry," she said, "I saw that you had some construction going on and I came to ask you about it." "Ask away," sighed the chairman, apparently fed up with the questions. "Have you seen what your workers eat?" she asked him. "I didn't think about this question. They don't complain. They keep silent, and I have a lot of work to do." He showed his hand above his head. "And let's organize a field kitchen, and at least we'll feed them normal lunches," the woman suggested. "And what would it take?" he asked her. "Nothing. Talk to the local women. If they agree, I am ready to help them in everything," the woman told him. "Okay, I'll tell them, and then it's up to you," the chairman replied, and considered the conversation over, watching as she left the office. The very next day, Harry did everything Betty had asked him to do, and today, they had a gathering at the club. Many women from the village had responded. They were now ready to do a good deed for the workers. Some cooked soup at home, others made the second course, and others baked flatbread. Beatty was not lagging behind either. She made cakes almost every day. The first time the workers received a home-cooked meal, they were overjoyed. So a week went by. And one day, Steve came up to Betty. They already knew each other. He smiled, took some pies from her, looked at them. "Are they good?" she asked him. "Very tasty. You have the most delicious pies in the world." He looked at her with black eyes. "I'm glad you like them," smiled back at him, and then she laughed. In the evening, she sat at home, waiting for no one, doing her usual chores. There was a knock on the window. She thought it was the local women, because they often dropped by to ask her for advice or to tell her what they were going to do tomorrow. Betty pulled back the curtain and was stunned. Outside the window stood Steve, smiling. She went out to him outside the gate, red as a cancer, because she liked the man. "Shall we go for a walk?" he asked her. "No, better let's sit at home." She didn't want any gossip around the village. He walked into her place. They sat down at the table. Betty had made tea, put out all the same cakes she had left at home. Now they sat and talked. Their meetings had become regular. Every evening Steve came to visit her. They chatted. They had so much in common. They seemed to understand each other half-heartedly. "Betty, you are extraordinary." Steve held her in his arms and tucked her hair behind her ear. Betty realized that now the construction would be over and they would all be out of here. She had prepared herself for this, realized he wouldn't stay with her, but she couldn't help it. She decided that as it was, so it would be. The vacation was ending in a week, and on the last day of vacation, Steve was at her place again. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she told him. "So that's it. That's the end of our meetings." He didn't believe her. "Why, it will not end. Just now I will come less often, only on weekends." She had already thought it over. "I will wait for you from Saturday to Saturday." He kissed her. The next day he was already at her place in the morning, seeing her off. They kissed goodbye, and Betty left. Her life was more interesting now. All day long she was at work. John had already become her deputy. Many of the women in the department had retired. Betty couldn't get enough of this young man who had come here knowing nothing and was now showing such results. And on Friday night, she would take the last bus and go to the village to her lover. And then, just before New Year's Eve, he came to see her. Betty knew it all at once when she saw the way he looked at her. "I won't keep you," she answered him. "You see, I have a wife and children there. I can't stay." He took her face in his hands as always and kissed her. "Goodbye," she kissed him, and in the morning their brigade left. Betty went back to town. She missed her, but she didn't let those thoughts take over her completely. Once she went to work, she didn't feel right. All day long she felt nauseous and dizzy. The next day in the morning, she asked to go to the hospital. When the doctor told her she was expecting a baby, she almost fell out of her chair. Betty was walking home. She didn't understand why this was happening now, when it seemed too late to have children. "Mom, you have no idea what is happening to me now." Sat down on a chair and began to tell her mother and the woman waited. "What I found out today." She was both scared and funny at the same time. because it would seem that she and her mother are already two grown women and can talk as friends. But Betty sat there, blushing like a schoolgirl. Are you out of your mind? Think how old you are, soon 45, and you're talking about a pregnancy. The mother grabbed her head, stood up, and went to the kitchen. What's wrong? Her father asked her. No, Mickey. Can you imagine? She's pregnant, and she wants to give birth, the woman told him, and just didn't know what to do. She went to the sink, drank some water, and went back to her daughter to talk her out of this rash act. No, Ma, I already listened to you once, and I'm not doing it now. I'm old enough, but I'm going to have this baby, so I can have someone in my life, she told her. Oh, that's it. I'm not interfering, it's your problem, and solve it yourself, her mother told her, and went into the other room, and Betty had already thought it over. She was at work until she got her maternity leave, and then she went to her boss and told her that John knew how to do everything. And now he can easily take my place while I'm on maternity leave, Betty announced to the boss. Well, Betty, I have even more respect for you, the woman in charge told her. And now there was no doubt in the woman's mind. She knew for sure that after giving birth, she would go to live in the country. She would have her own house, fresh air, and she would live happily there. Strangely enough, despite her age, the pregnancy was very easy. The doctors were afraid too. If after 25 they called women old born at that time, then Betty, who was over 40, they did not bode well at all. Practically, the day she was due, a healthy baby boy, whom Betty named Austin, was born. Her mother and father, of course, came to her discharge because it was their grandson, and they were so excited about the event that they just cried when they picked up their daughter. Mommy, don't worry. I'm not gonna live with you. Dad, if it's not too much trouble for you with all your things, can you take us to the village? She asked him. Are you sure you can manage alone? Her father asked her. Of course I am. I am experienced, strong, smart, and nothing can stop me, she smiled. The very next day in the morning, the car was on its way towards the village, and from now on, Betty began to live alone in her grandmother's house. She also had the most wonderful person in the world by her side, her son Ostinka. The woman continued to take an active part in the life of the village. She could go wherever she needed to go with her son or alone, so in a short time she was accepted and loved by everyone there. When Austin was a year old, she and he traveled to the city to visit his grandparents. They went there once or twice a month, and now they were going too. As Betty entered the apartment, holding her son in her arms, she heard her mother sobbing. She went into the room where the woman was, saw her sitting on the couch, crying. She went up to her, hugged her, and asked her what was going on. Daddy is not well. He was taken to the hospital, and no one says anything good, the woman said through sobs. Mommy, don't get upset. Everything will be fine, her daughter told her. She left Austin with her grandmother and went to the hospital. There indeed, the doctor said that the man was not well, and whatever medicines they gave him, nothing helped him. Only 9 days passed and the father was gone. How could it be? Sobbed Ariana at the grave. She couldn't imagine life without Mickey. He was her support, her backbone, her strong shoulder. Mommy, you have to move on, Betty reassured her, even though she couldn't hold on. But she did hold on so her mother wouldn't see her tears. Yeah, the woman nodded, but she felt like she was in the wrong place. Mom, why don't you come to the village with me? Betty told her, I'm sure I won't bother you there. The woman realized that she didn't want to stay in the city either, because she had nothing to do here alone. Yes, what are you saying? What? To interfere? On the contrary, you will only help me, she told her. Together they packed all their things, went to the village, and now they lived here, in her grandmother's house. Ariana helped in everything, both in the household and with the upbringing of the child. But as soon as they thought of Mickey, they immediately became very sad. One evening, when Betty was returning from a meeting, she saw someone sitting on a bench near their gate. She was surprised, walked over, and froze in place. Steve was sitting there. What are you doing here? She didn't understand. She was so happy inside. Her heart was pounding. She didn't understand what was happening to her. I came to see you, he told her. What about your wife, your children? She sat down next to him. I told her everything. She understood, and I realized that I can't live without you. He pressed her against him. Okay, let's go. They went into the house. Mother was also shocked to have such guests. Betty had never told her anything much, and she didn't say anything now either. Steve began to live with the two women. He probably thought the baby might be his, but he never asked about it. "Look, Betty, let's enlarge your house," Steve said to her one day. "Could you do that?" She looked at him. "You bet your man's got the right hands," he told her. "Well, if you want to do it yourself, and you have the strength, please, we'll get the building materials, I'll help you. You can call one of the neighbors," Betty said. "I'm in no hurry, so I think I can do it all by myself," he promised her. "Steve, I'm so glad you've come." Betty looked at him often as she sat in the kitchen. Her mother was in the room with Austin at this time. On some level, she too was glad that a man had finally come to her daughter. But on the other hand, everyone realized that he had a family, and even if he said that his wife understood him, it was not certain that he had divorced her and would not leave again. But like last time, nobody thought about it or said it out loud. "Listen, the other night," Betty whispered in Steve's ear. "What?" He turned to her. "You won't believe this, but I think I'm expecting a baby again." She looked at him with frightened eyes. "What are you going to do?" He fell silent and waited for her answer. "I think I'm going to give birth." She didn't know how Steve would feel about what she was doing, but she believed that everything would be fine. And in the other case, well, she raised Austin on her own. She didn't ask anyone for anything. Everything was fine. And now that the boy's 2 years old, why not have another baby? "Darling, I love you so much." He kissed her face again. "You see, I've been with my husband for so many years, and I've never even had a hint that I was pregnant," Betty told him. "What are you saying?" He didn't finish speaking. "No, I don't want to say anything. I just love you too." She put her head on his shoulder, pressed her whole body against his, and closed her eyes. "Daughter, how are you doing?" Her mom asked her in the morning. "If I tell you, you'll be shocked again." Betty didn't look up at her. "Don't tell me you're pregnant again." Her mother sank down on her stool and clutched her heart. "Mom, what can you do? If God decided to give me children only at this age?" Betty put her hands on her stomach. "Daughter, what are you?" "Think about it. 1 child, okay, enough, but where to 2? She did not understand. "Mom, I've made up my mind. We talked to Steve and decided that I'm going to have the baby," she told her. "Oh, that's it. Dismiss me. I'm not a counselor at all. I don't know anything. I won't promise or say anything," and so on. The woman stood up. She went to the sink, washed her face, and went to her grandson's room. Betty was strong. She didn't rely on anyone. She knew she could handle everything on her own. And now that she was pregnant again, everything was just fine. She and Steve went everywhere together, did everything together. He'd started doing things around the house as promised. He was really getting a lot done, but Betty was also thinking about the fact that she would soon be out of one maternity leave and would start a second one. There was going to have to be some warning at work about that. She looked at Steve, not knowing what to do. "What if you just call?" Steve asked her. "Do you think a phone call would be enough?" She didn't believe it. "Well, it's worth a try," he shrugged. So Betty went to the village council. From the chairman's office, she called her boss, told her how and what. "Come on, there you have the difference between it is only a few months. I think you should not go out. Write an application for vacation and rest further," the woman told her. "Okay, thank you. I'll rest further." She emphasized the word rest. But still, Betty was not going to give birth in the village. She went to the city with her mother by her side. And again, the same hospital, the same maternity ward. Now the doctors were also shocked that Betty had been seen at some village health center. The gynecologist didn't want to see her at all because he was afraid that if something went wrong, it would be his fault. So Betty had to sign some papers. And there she lay, happy because she had her little daughter Elizabeth on her chest. She was lying there and grunting so sweetly that her mom just smiled, even though it hurt so much. "Well, home?" she said to her daughter as she swaddled her up. Mom came to the discharge with Austin. Steve hadn't come from the village, but they hadn't arranged it. Betty thought she would stay at her mother's for a couple of days and then go back to the village. Betty was old, but she didn't feel old at all. It seemed to her that she was still a 20-year-old girl who seduced men, gave birth to children. And now she would start building a house and everything else. And it made her feel so light and bright, that she didn't think about anything else but that. "Steve, I'm so happy with you," she said to her man. "And you know how you motivate me. I'd do anything for you," he told her. By then, Steve was still feeding her with promises that he would get a job in the village council, in the fields, or wherever. But as long as he made her a house, could watch the kids, she didn't say anything. But one day something happened that Betty thought about sometimes, but for some reason she had given up waiting for that moment. She was very unhappy when it happened. In the evening, there was a knock at the window. It was very late, so Betty looked at Steve and didn't realize who it was. "Maybe I'll go out," he told her. And when the front doors opened about 5 minutes later, Betty just grinned. Steve's wife was standing on the doorstep. I guess if she had small children, she would have come with them. "So how's it going with your estranged husband?" the woman asked her. "Fine," Betty answered her, "except I didn't know he was still your husband. So you should know that the children are waiting for him at home, so I had to step on my pride and come to you." The woman looked at her. There was nothing left to do. It was getting very late, so Betty put everyone at the table, gave them tea, and fed them dinner. She couldn't just throw that woman out on the street. Maybe she could, but the next day there would be such gossip all over the village that she'd have to leave. Everyone ate in silence. Then Betty made up a bed for Steve and his wife in the room where her mother used to live, and laid down in her own room with the children. In the morning, as they were leaving the house, Steve turned his head and with one lip said to her, "I'm sorry," and Betty waved him off. "Goodbye," she said, turned around, and walked into the yard, knowing that she would never accept this man again, and she would never believe him. When the doors slammed behind her, she sat down on a bench and just burst into tears. For almost 2 years they had lived here. Why hadn't his wife come sooner? Why hadn't he told her anything? Why hadn't he been able to divorce her in that time? But all these questions were unanswered. By now, Austin was in kindergarten. Elizabeth was still in her mother's arms, but the woman realized that it was necessary to get out of maternity leave, to go to work to earn money. Betty gathered the children, put her things together herself, decided that she would get herself together, and she would definitely do everything. She arrived in town and went straight to work to see what was up and running. "Hello, everyone." She entered the office. "Betty Petrovna." John stood up to meet her. He had indeed taken her place, and the woman was glad for the young man. "Well, how is everything here?" she asked, and began to look around. "Yes, everything is normal. We sit, we work." John waved his hands. "Okay, I'll go to the boss." The woman winked at him. When she entered the office, she was also welcome there, but no one was in a hurry to accept a woman from maternity leave. "But what about it? I have 2 children. I have to raise them." Could not understand Betty. "You see, Betty, while there is time, you can sit still. I just do not want to fire a person, and you tomorrow will go on sick leave." Did not look in her eyes, boss. "So I have a mom," waved her hands. "No, we have to wait," shook the woman behind the desk from side to side. Betty headed home. She didn't understand how things could have gotten this way. When she entered the apartment, she immediately sensed something wrong. Elizabeth was screaming so much that her mother's heart almost burst with excitement. She ran into the room and saw that the woman was lying on the sofa. She looked with her eyes, they moved, and that was it. Mommy fell to her knees in front of her, Betty. She just mumbled back. "What the hell is this?" Betty went to the phone and dialed the ambulance. The paramedics arrived and took Ariana to the hospital. Betty sat down on the couch. She covered her eyes with her hands and cried. Now it seemed to her that everything was against her. Every day now, she and her children were in the hospital. How hard it was. No one can understand her, but the woman braced herself. Sometimes she thought that she had decided everything in her life, and now she had to do everything on her own. "Betty," someone shoved her in the shoulder. The nurses at the hospital had taken pity on the woman, and now she and the children were in the same room as Ariana, and they were sleeping there. "What?" She opened her eyes and immediately realized everything on the medic's face. "Your mom," he looked away. "No," the woman said quietly, so as not to frighten the children. And then there was the funeral. Betty did everything right. She sat with the children in the empty apartment, wondering what she should do now. "I can do anything," she said to herself, got up, and began to pack things that now simply will not be needed by anyone. Already a week later, BT, along with the children, were on their way to the village. The woman firmly decided that she would not live in the city. At first, she even began to think about selling the housing in the city to invest in a house. But then she changed her mind because her children will come here when they grow up. They will have a place to live. Here we are, she said to Austin and Elizabeth when they were back where their souls felt good. Her son had gone back to kindergarten, and her mother had put Lisa in after him. Now, she was determined to get the house up to code. Steve had organized everything so well here. He added a few rooms, also made a second floor, but everything was in the rough, so to speak. The woman bought paints, brushes, oilcloth, flooring, began to finish everything. In the village, the locals respected her. They remembered how she had organized food for the workers who were building the dairy farm. BT, hello. She heard someone shouting at her from outside the fence. She looked out the window and was surprised to see Selena standing there, the same one she had feuded with as a child. Hello, what do you want? The woman came outside. She hadn't seen Svetlana since she first came here, and she was living here now. Here, back in her native land, Selena waved her hands. What do you want from me? For a moment, Betty returned to her childhood when she didn't want to leave the house because she was afraid of this company. I decided to head one of the departments of the farm, but when I got there, I realized that there was no way we could do without an accountant, and then the locals told me about you, looked at her guest. You're offering me a job. Betty was surprised. Yes, you heard me right. Selena smiled. It was obvious that she was being kind. Okay, I accept. Not even a moment's hesitation from Betty. Great, I'll see you tomorrow morning with the paperwork. Selena nodded her head slightly. They said their goodbyes and both went off to continue their business. It was flattering to be accepted in this village. Betty began to pick out the clothes she would wear to go to her job tomorrow. In the evening, she picked up the children from the garden. They sat down to dinner. It seemed life was starting to get better. Now Betty was working. She received a good salary, was on good account with the bosses. The woman created a collective in the club. They sang songs, performed at concerts, and in their spare time, they do crafts. Austin, come here, called the mother of her son. Today, he was going to the first grade. It was necessary to check if everything was good in his outfit. Mom, where are the flowers? He looked at her. Now everything will be. The knife was already lying on the bench, so that when leaving, the mother cut flowers in the vegetable garden. Elizabeth was running around. She too was in a beautiful dress. Well, and you have already grown up, stood the mother on the ruler, eyes tearful. Time flew very fast, and now Elizabeth became a first grader. Austin walked with importance. He thought he was all grown up. Betty finished the house. Now it was just candy. It was one of the biggest and most beautiful in the village. Mom, let me get some water, Austin said. Betty looked at him and couldn't believe that this was really her boy, who not long ago was lying in his crib. Sure enough, she was bringing him a couple buckets. Betty was not the last person in the village. She loved to invite guests to her house. On this day, the woman cooked all day, and in the evening there were fun gatherings. Mom, can you teach me how to make pancake batter? Elizabeth often came to her. Of course, she looked at her daughter. They always did everything together. Betty would never have thought that those whom she gave birth to, raised and cared for, would ever do bad things to her. At some point, the woman decided that it was time to get some animals. And why? The yard is big. There is strength. Guys, come here, she called the kids. Austin was already in the 8th grade, Elizabeth a little younger. Why do you need it? The boy grumbled. He knew that they would have to do all this too. Why? Need of their own eggs. Betty looked at them. I don't know, Austin shrugged and looked at his sister. Okay, let's just give it a try, the woman asked them. It's up to you, you'll do most of the work anyway. The son didn't want to do anything at all. Lately, he'd been at the machine and tractor shop. The men there had taken him in and were teaching him all sorts of tricks. Austin wanted to go to the city after high school, go to college there, learn to be a motor mechanic, and come back here. He didn't care about anything else. All right, it was decided. The mother got up from the couch. She was confident in her abilities, so the next weekend, they all went to the market together. "Look what," said their daughter and pointed her finger at the boxes in which there were different animals. "Well, Elizabeth, choose." They stood near the boxes with chickens. They decided to start with the birds. If they succeeded with this one, then maybe they would buy some more. The family arrived home, at which point Betty decided that she had had enough. She didn't want to work anymore. So the next day she wrote an application. Now she was only occupied with the household, children, vegetable garden. "Mom, well, what if I go to the city? I will live there in the apartment of grandmother," Austin asked her. Of course, if you can manage, the mother was not sorry as long as everything was good. "You know me," he assured her. As Austin was graduating from high school, his mother and Elizabeth stood looking at their son and brother and were proud of him. Now he was leaving them for the city, but he promised to come visit and help. "Soon I'll go to school too," Elizabeth told Austin as she hugged him at the station. "Don't hurry, life is fleeting," her mother told her quietly. Now they were alone in the house. "Where are these rooms going?" Betty often asked. Before, everything had seemed so nice to her, but now she no longer had the energy to clean everywhere. "Mama, let me help," Elizabeth said, and Betty knew that in the evening she would have to go to the disco again. "All right," she agreed with her daughter, and so they lived to see Elizabeth's graduation. She didn't go to high school either. After ninth grade, she decided to go to Austin's place in the city. Leaving Mom all alone, Betty said sadly, "Mom, don't be like that." Her daughter looked at her. "No, I'm just saying," she wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. It seemed to Betty that time had passed so quickly that she hadn't noticed anything at all. Only yesterday she had been a young woman full of vigor, and now, standing here at the station, she felt like a wreck. Betty returned home, realizing that now she was here in the house all alone. One day she was walking down the street and heard a cat meowing somewhere. She found it, picked it up, brought it home, and then another and another. Now the woman had an outlet. The children were in no hurry to go to the village to visit her, even though they had promised. "Betty, are you home?" She heard her outside the gate. She looked out of the window and smiled. There stood her friends with whom she had sung in the choir together. She let them all go home, and they began to sit around, but that didn't happen very often. Austin and Elizabeth lived in the city in her grandparents' apartment. At first, while they were studying, everything was fine and friendly. But the moment Austin brought home a girl for the first time, the quarrels between brother and sister began. "Why do you always stay home?" Austin didn't understand her. "Unlike you, I'm studying," his sister told him. "What's there to study for?" He didn't understand. He and his new girlfriend needed privacy, but they couldn't afford it. And then Elizabeth met a young man, and so the four of them began to live together. "Why do not you have your own place?" Often asked Elizabeth's suitor Austin. "He lives with his mother, and I do not want to go there," Elizabeth parried. Speaking of Mom, Austin looked at her. "Maybe we should go and visit her. It's been a year since we've been there." "Yes, I don't mind, and we can introduce our other halves to her," Elizabeth said. Such friendly conversations were very rare. No one was against the trip to the village, so on the weekend, all gathered and headed towards the village. Betty heard voices in the yard, noises. She didn't realize who it could be, but when she came out into the yard, she smiled and couldn't hide her joy that her children had come to visit her. She hugged everyone and stopped her attention on a young man and a girl who were unfamiliar to her. The guests entered the house and sat down at the table. The mother immediately began to do something. She took out some treats, pies, put tea. "Mom, meet Mila," Austin said, and showed her his fiancée. "And this is Mickey," Elizabeth pointed to her fiancé. "Nice to meet you, and me, Betty," she smiled back at them. Betty would never advise either son or daughter on who to choose as a life partner, because she had listened to her mother and it had all fallen apart. And now she was ready to accept the one they would love. After sitting at the table, Austin got up and started walking around the house. Of course, he remembered what and where he was, but now he was looking not with the eyes of a child, but an adult. "Mom, what if we renovate the place?" He looked back at the woman. "What do you want to redecorate?" She was surprised. "Well, I don't know. There's a lot of things to redecorate here." The kid walked around looking. "If you want to do it, she didn't mind." After that, the kids stayed a couple more days and went back to the city. Their life there continued. Now they did not spoil their mother with attention. They came to see her once a month or even once every 2 months. They were having more and more scandals in the apartment. "Austin, are you going to propose to me?" Mila told him when they had been dating for 5 years. "Look, I need to get on my feet first. Get a place to live," he told her. "So let's exchange the apartment. What's the problem?" She didn't understand. Elizabeth and Mickey didn't formalize their relationship either. Brother and sister practically didn't communicate because lately they were fighting over square meters. Once Mila was so offended by her fiancé that she packed her things and just left. Austin watched her and couldn't believe it would ever happen. He left too. He sat at the bar all night tonight, feeling sick. But when he got home, he found his sister sitting in the kitchen crying. "What are you doing?" he asked her. "Did you know?" Elizabeth turned to him. "About what?" Austin didn't understand much at the moment because the drinks at the bar were getting to him. Mickey and Mila. Elizabeth stopped talking. "What?" Austin didn't understand her. They were now sitting in the kitchen and both of them couldn't understand how they hadn't noticed that their other halves had probably been together for a long time. "Elizabeth, why don't we exchange the apartment?" Austin asked her. "Listen, maybe we'll sell the house in the village and buy an apartment in the city." His sister looked at him. "And where would mother go?" Austin realized that the woman was already old and she would have to live with someone else. "Maybe we'll think of something," the girl said. She realized that it was a cunning plan, but at the same moment she realized that it was really a way out of the situation. The next day, she and Austin went to her mother's village, first to calm down from what had happened the day before, and then to talk about her bad plan. In the morning, Austin scouted out how much his mother's house might be worth. It turned out to be good money. And now, he didn't think about anything else. Not his conscience, not his mother, not his sister. He had to come up with a good plan. As they drove to the village, he was silent the whole way. "Children," mother was doing something in the yard, and when they entered the gate, she couldn't believe it was really them. "Hi, Mom." They all went into the house. They were doing something, helping their mother. She was even surprised that it had been so many days and they were still not back in town. "Mom, do you remember when we went mushroom picking as kids?" Austin asked her. "Of course I remember. How could I forget that?" She smiled back at him. "Maybe we can go now too." He looked at his sister and winked at her. Elizabeth understood everything. "Yes, let's go, only we have to go in the morning. So let's wait until tomorrow and go," Betty told them. "Let's go right now." Austin looked at his watch. It was 10 in the morning. "Okay, if you want, we can go right now," the woman agreed. They gathered some provisions. Elizabeth was in the kitchen making sandwiches and tea. Austin was packing baskets. Not half an hour later, they were ready to move out into the woods. "Why don't we take my father's old car?" Austin asked the woman. "It's probably not running, just scrap metal." The mother waved her hand and smiled. "And the motorcycle?" Austin asked her. "Well, a motorcycle might still be possible," his mother doubted, but they decided to give it a try. When they loaded up and drove off, no one was exactly thinking anything yet. Austin and Elizabeth hadn't agreed on anything. They had talked about it a bit on the road, but it was all at random. Now they came to the deepest part of the woods, stopping. "Oh, Austin, why didn't you drive us so far?" The woman did not understand. "Mom, but no one walks here, and definitely there are mushrooms, berries." He looked around. They began to walk through the forest, where they collected something, and when several hours passed, they came to a clearing. Elizabeth spread a blanket on the ground, sat down on it, and took out a thermos of tea. Austin and Betty sat down next to her. Elizabeth looked at her brother, poured the tea into a mug, and handed it to her mother. "What is that tea that tastes so strange?" Betty asked. It wasn't long before her eyes blurred, and then it was just darkness. The woman woke up to the fact that she was very cold. She opened her eyes and realized she was lying in the same forest on a blanket. "Austin, Elizabeth," she shouted, but no one answered her. Betty tried to get up, but she couldn't. She leaned back on the plaid, wrapped herself in the other end. Her teeth chattered from the cold in a way that seemed to echo throughout the forest. Betty didn't understand a thing. How could the children have left her here? What if something had happened to them? But now her mind was so clouded that she didn't want to think about anything. She tried to get to her feet. There was a large stick lying nearby. She picked it up, covered herself with a plaid, leaned on the stick, and walked. It wasn't clear where she was going. There was such an impenetrable darkness around that it seemed to Betty that she was blind. At first, she walked by feel through the trees, but then she decided that it was necessary to get to the morning, and then she might find a path to the village. The woman wrapped herself in the plaid, tucked her legs under her, sat under one of the trees, her head still spinning. She shook it off, exhaled. The hours seemed to drag on for a very long time. And then it began to get lighter and lighter over the forest. Well, thank God, exhaled Betty, for in an hour it was almost light. She realized that it was early morning, so she had to get out. First she stood up, feeling that she had strength in her. Leaning on a stick, she walked to one side. Somehow she was sure that's where they had come from. She walked through the forest, shouting, thinking that maybe some foresters or mushroom hunters would be here, but no one answered her. When the weeds appeared ahead, Betty realized she was going the wrong way. The sun was burning so hot that even the branches of the big trees did not help to hide from it. She was thirsty, but she had no water with her. The woman sank to the ground. She covered her face with her hands and cried. She smirked to herself now. It might not have been true, but she realized that the children had done it on purpose. They were fed up with her. The old woman, what to do with her, where to put her? And they're young. They have to live. I wish the wolves would come and eat me here, she said aloud. And then Betty noticed a fungus, and at that moment she remembered Oliver. How he had led her through this forest, how he had shown her and told her where north was, where south was, what to eat, how to drink. At that moment, it was as if there had been a surge of strength. Betty stirred. She got down on her knees, crawled up to the tree, and began to look at where the moss was growing. When she had identified everything, then began to look for the berries. She remembered that they grew on the south side, and when she found the clearing, the morning dew that was still on the leaves refreshed her at least a little. After she had eaten some berries and licked the dew off the leaves, she simply fell on her back between the small bushes and laughed out loud. And yet she didn't want to listen to him then. She was bored with the stories. If only she'd known she could use it someday. So what else did Oliver say? Oh, how to sleep on the cold ground, which requires matches, and I don't have any, so that's out, she reasoned aloud. At first, Betty decided that she was not going anywhere, that she would stay where she was. What if she was wrong, and the kids hadn't left her here on purpose? They'll start looking for her, and she'll leave the place. They won't find her at all. But then the woman decided that she couldn't stay where she was, so she went north. She determined the direction by the trees, followed the road where she saw good branches, gathered brushwood, because when darkness fell, she spread thin sticks on the ground like a mat, laid down on them, and covered herself with a plaid, which she also dragged with her. She walked for days, gathering dew in the morning, eating berries and mushrooms, thanking Oliver for telling her which were edible, even raw. One day she came across a brook from which she drank. Betty sat by that stream for a long time, wondering where it could flow from. She didn't realize how many days she had been here, but at some point she realized that she couldn't walk anymore. Her feet were tarred with blood. She still gathered some brushwood, made a bed under a tree, and lay down. At some point she heard a noise in the distance, like something being said. What if it was an animal, or maybe it was just her imagination? She peeked out from behind a tree, and then a gunshot rang out. Betty's pupils dilated, and she sat there dead and alive. "Help!" she shouted, because she was afraid that she might be mistaken for a wounded animal, and now she would be killed. "Ow, I'm here! Help!" she shouted again. Then she heard the rustling of pine needles under her boots. Someone was approaching her. And when the man leaned over her and she looked up at him, she was breathless. "John? John, is that you?" She started to hug him. "Bethy," he wondered, "what are you doing here? Please help me. I don't know by what miracle you are here, but I need to go to the village," she told him and cried. The three men quickly took the woman under their arms. They brought her to the car, sat her down. Everyone looked at her and did not understand how such an old woman could be in the middle of the forest. "John, you tell me, how did you get here?" Betty said through her tears. "You know, thanks to you, I have achieved a lot in my life. I filled your position for many years, Then I became a supervisor, and then I was elected mayor. And now this weekend, we decided to go hunting with some friends," he told her. "What weekend?" The woman looked up at him. "Why?" He looked at her in the rearview mirror. "We went into the woods on Saturday," Betty reflected. "So, with no food and no water, you spent a week in the deep woods?" John asked her. "I guess so," she smirked. "I think the children decided to get rid of me and took me here, knowing I couldn't get out." The woman said it all very sadly. When the car pulled up to the house, Elizabeth and Austin ran to the window. They didn't realize who it could be. When first a man came out of there and then a woman was led out under their arms, they just couldn't believe it. "Hello." John entered the house. He was already a very personable man, and now Elizabeth and Austin stood under his gaze and lowered their eyes. "How could you do this? Was there really no other way out?" He told them. The children simply remained silent. The mother was carried into the room, laid on the bed. "It's done," said the mayor's friends. "Be warned, I will personally watch you. If a single hair falls from your mother's head, you will regret it." He threatened Austin and Elizabeth. When the man left the house and left, the children did not stay here either. They were ashamed. They quickly packed their things and retreated. A week later, John arrived. He said that Betty was allotted a small house. If she agreed, they were ready to move her right away. "Oh, I don't need anything anymore," she said, and then asked John to go to her children and tell them she forgave them. By evening, Austin and Elizabeth were at their mother's house. They went into the house and approached Mother, who was sitting in the kitchen at the table. Both got down on their knees and cried. "Mommy, please forgive us for what we have done. You raised us, brought us up, and you and I are so." They raised their eyes to her. "You are the most valuable thing that I have in my life, and I do not hold a grudge against you." She hugged them and pressed them to her knees. After that, everyone sat down at the table, but son and daughter were still uneasy that they could have done such a thing. "Mom, I'll do anything to make sure you have a good life," Austin said. "And so will I," Elizabeth put in her word. "You know, guys, God gave you to me late, but I have never regretted that you were born. You are my happiness, the light in the window. Tell me, I'll take everything I need, and I'll go to the forest myself, just to make you feel good," cried Betty. "No, what are you saying?" The children rushed to her at that moment, imagining what could happen if she did not return from the forest. "Did you realize that all good deeds in life come back?" The woman looked at the children. "You mean John?" Austin guessed. "Yes," nodded the mother. "Does it turn out that the evil ones will return too?" The sister looked up at her brother. "Don't need to think about it. Everything will be fine." They sat in the kitchen and hugged. Ariana, when she was in school, she never imagined what fate awaited her later in life. She remembers when she was a little girl, she and her mom and dad used to take walks in the park. Daddy was tall. He would put her on his shoulders and she would squeal because she was scared. But then Daddy was gone. "Mommy, why did Daddy leave us?" She'd often ask the woman. "Baby, it happens in life. When you grow up, you'll understand everything yourself." Her mother stroked her head. That day, Anthony was going to work. Everything was as usual, nothing foreboding something terrible. The fire station where he worked was not far from home. At some point, the dispatcher's phone rang. On the outskirts of town, an old two-story barracks was on fire. The team worked quickly. They got in their cars, drove to the address. Anthony never rushed forward, never heroic. But today, when he already realized that he had to go out, he heard a squeak. At first, he thought it was an animal, a cat or a dog, and already rushed forward, but he couldn't even leave the animal there in the fire. Where to? His partner saw him as Anthony rushed back to the room completely engulfed in flames. There, under an iron bed, he saw a small boy, grabbed him by the arm, dragged him toward him. And as he took a couple of steps toward the exit, a beam from the ceiling burned through and broke off. He only had time to pull the boy against him, and he fell to the floor. The partner who had been watching the whole thing couldn't get in anymore. "Anthony, over here, help." He started calling for help. Once again, the team worked swiftly. The boy's mother and older sister were taken to the hospital. They were unconscious. They were followed by the little boy who Anthony had saved. But Anthony could not be saved. The partner called his wife right away. "Yes, Harry, is something wrong?" She answered him. Of course, she had heard about the fire too. But she had no idea what the man would tell her now. Celine, be strong. He fell silent. This can't be happening. She realized everything. Unfortunately, it happened, but he saved the boy. He'll probably get an award now, Harry muttered. Why do I need awards? At this point, she was in a pre-fainting state. There was no more Celine could say. And then there was the funeral, and indeed, the head of the city had given an award to Peter for saving people in the fire. But there was no way she could give Selena her husband back. Now Selena and her daughter Ariana were alone. There was also a grandmother who used to come very rarely, but afterwards began to practically live with them. When Ariana was 10 years old, it was the first time her mother felt very sick. Mommy, what's wrong? Her daughter came to her. I'm fine, it's probably just low blood pressure, she told her and took some pills. Are you sure you're okay? The girl was worried about her. Don't worry, it's fine, though Selena herself knew it wasn't, but there was no need to scare the girl. Now her grandmother had practically moved in to live with them because Selena was getting worse every day. When Ariana was in 8th grade, her grandmother went to the village to visit her sister. It was very warm outside, and the girl got ready to go for a walk. Mom, I'm going outside, she approached her. Good, agreed her mother. Selena had been almost completely out of bed lately. Ariana went to the courtyard. There she and the girls agreed to meet, and they went for a walk. They reached the park. There were boys sitting on the benches. The girls sat down nearby and started laughing loudly on purpose, attracting the attention of young people. Girls, why don't you come to the disco with us? They said to them. No way. They waved them away. Well, what's the big deal? The guys didn't understand. Let's at least get acquainted, said Ariana. All right, I'm John and this is Archie, my best friend. The girls introduced themselves to him too. They were still shy and embarrassed, even though they were good looking. So shall we go to the disco in the evening? Asked John. I don't even know. My mom is home alone. Ariana looked at her friends. And what happens if you stay a little longer? They didn't understand. You see, she doesn't get up at all, said Ariana, realizing that her grandmother wouldn't come in the evening either. Oh, nothing will happen to your mom. You left everything for her, didn't you? Her friend asked her. Of course, Ariana answered her. All the more reason to worry. They didn't understand. And Ariana thought that her mom was really home. She was warm and well. She had water and food, so she shouldn't worry. She wouldn't be so late. The friends walked a little more. The boys joined them, and in the evening, when the disco was to start, they went there. It's fun with you guys, John shouted, trying to outshout the music. With you too, the girls danced. When it was late, Ariana didn't wait until it was over. She went home. One of the girls looked at her watch. No, I'll go, she said, and immediately got up from the chair and headed for the exit. She was in a great hurry to get home because she was afraid for her mom. She didn't know why. Ariana saw that there were lights on in the windows, even though she hadn't turned anything on during the day when she left. Maybe Grandma is here, she said aloud near the entrance, quickly opened the door, went up to the floor. When the girl entered the apartment, she shrieked. Her mom was lying in the hallway. Mommy, she ran up to her. Daughter, the one moved her hand and looked at her. The girl jumped up. She immediately dialed an ambulance. The doctors arrived. It was clear that Selena needed to go to the hospital. Can I come with you? Ariana asked them. If you want, let's go, but believe me, today you have nothing to do in the hospital. Come back tomorrow, one of the medics told her. Early in the morning, the grandmother arrived. When she didn't see her daughter in her room, she immediately realized everything. Ariana, she entered her granddaughter's room. What? Replied the one. It was heard that Ariana's voice was not the same. Where is the mother? The woman asked her. Grandma, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Cried immediately the girl. Yes, explain to me, what is your fault? The woman didn't understand. I wasn't supposed to go anywhere yesterday, but the girls called me to the disco. I decided to stay for a while, and when I came, she stopped talking because tears were choking her. Well, a woman was waiting, and when I came, my mom was already lying on the floor. The girl got up and went somewhere, probably to the toilet. She covered her eyes with her hands and continued to cry. Everything will be fine. Get ready. "Now we'll go to the hospital," said her grandmother. She herself went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for her daughter and her granddaughter. While Ariana was getting ready, her grandmother had already made pancakes. Ariana ate some of them and they put some in a container to take to the hospital. Once there, they met with the doctor. The doctor didn't give any positive prognosis. Surgery was needed, but he was afraid to even schedule it. "I'm afraid your daughter won't be able to withstand the anesthesia," the doctor told the grandmother. "What should we do then?" She didn't understand. "We will do our best," the specialist promised her. Now Selena was in the hospital for 2 weeks. She was discharged, and then she had to take medication and everything else. Now already Ariana went for walks as little as possible because she realized that it was hard for her grandmother too. And so, when ninth grade was coming to an end, in the morning Ariana woke up as usual and went to the bathroom to wash her face. But before that, she always stopped by her mom's house. "Good morning." She peeked into the room and saw her mother's arm hanging off the bed. She went over to her, tried to adjust the blanket, and took her hand, but it was cold. "Mommy!" Ariana screamed then. She crawled to the floor, tears rolling down her face. She was getting hysterical. Grandma came into the room. "Let's get out of here. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go." She lifted her up. All the services were called. We had to prepare for the funeral. And if grandmother kept herself in control, she did everything right. Ariana couldn't do anything at all. She didn't understand how she would be alone, what she would do, how to live without her beloved mommy. Selena was buried next to her husband. They were together now. "Grandma, tell me, why is this happening? Why does it hurt so much?" Ariana asked her. "Little girl, don't be sad. You still have a lot to go through," Maria told her. She, of course, could say that her parents were now sitting on a cloud, watching over her, so the girl would be fine. But Ariana was old enough not to believe in those fairy tales. They returned home. They needed to move on with their lives. Now the summer vacation was beginning, and the woman decided that rest in a children's camp to her granddaughter would only benefit her. And when she bought vouchers and informed Ariana about it, the latter took the information quite differently. The girl thought that her grandmother didn't need her, and that she had bought the vouchers on purpose to send her away from herself. Of course, she didn't tell anyone about it. She left. Yes, the time on vacation was very fun. Every day there was some entertainment, disco. Ariana had made a lot of new friends, and now she was returning home with some fear inside. "Well, my dear, how did you rest there?" her grandmother asked her. "Fine," she answered simply. "What's wrong with you? You're not like that." Maria didn't understand her. "Grandma," she'd hugged her and cried. "What?" She didn't understand her. "I thought you wanted to leave me too. You sent me to this camp so I wouldn't be with you," Ariana said through her sobs. "What are you talking about?" The woman pressed her even more tightly against her. "It's not true. You won't send me to an orphanage." Ariana looked at her. "My darling, I sent you to the camp to rest a little, to get away from everything that happened here." The grandmother also cried because she realized what her granddaughter was thinking. "I love you." Ariana hugged her grandmother again, only now realizing that she was still the only close person she had. The girl continued to study at school. As she wanted to enter the institute, it was necessary to finish 11 grades. Now together with her grandmother on weekends, they went to the cemetery. When it was warm, Ariana liked to sit on a bench next to her mom and dad, talk to them, tell them what happened to her and how she was doing. All the same, she and the girls went for walks, went to discos, got acquainted with guys. But she didn't neglect her studies. When she won another Olympiad or got a perfect score, the only one from the class, her grandmother was very proud of her granddaughter. She knew that everything would work out in her life, and she would help her. "Bah, I'm going to Natalie's." Ariana shouted to her and wanted to go out. "Wait," the woman came out into the hallway. "Well, what else?" The girl was standing and shuffling from foot to foot. "Please be careful," the woman asked her. "Why are you suddenly?" The granddaughter didn't understand. Her grandmother had seen her off, but never like this. "Ariana, be careful with guys too," Maria told her. "Bah, yes, what guys? I need to finish school and pass my exams. That's not what I'm thinking about now." She laughed back at her. "About that, not about that." but it's never too late to warn, said her grandmother. It was only after that that Ariana opened the doors and walked out. She went to her girlfriend's house, who lived in the neighboring house. Today they were going to go for a walk because it was warm outside and they didn't have to go to school tomorrow. Shall we sit in the park or go to a cafe? Natalie asked her. Let's go to the park. We don't have money for a cafe, answered her friend. They went to an ice cream stand and bought a waffle cup and a bottle of lemonade. The girls sat down on a bench and just started talking about everything. Are you scared before the exams? Natalie asked Ariana. I don't know at all how we will pass them. Come on, your grades are fine, like me. Natalie shook her head. Hey girls, why are you bored here alone? Suddenly a young man came up to them. Who told you we were bored? Natalie asked him. I don't know, it just seemed that way to me, he answered and smiled. Not at all, the girls laughed. Can I join you? It was clear that the guy had no intention of backing down. Why not sit down, Ariana said. I'm Gob. He smiled again, his smile so cute. The boy immediately took a liking to the girl. I'm Ariana and this is Natalie, she said. Nice to meet you, and let's go to the cafe. I'll buy you a drink, he offered them. The girls looked at each other. They were going there themselves, but since they were not sure about the financial plan, so now they gladly agreed to Gob's proposal. The young people entered the room, which was not far from where they had just sat, took a table. Gob handed them a menu and told them to choose whatever they wanted. Of course, the girls realized that they shouldn't abuse the guy's kindness either, so they ordered a light salad and a cocktail. He ordered one too. Now they sat and waited for everything to be brought to them. Are you in school? Gob asked them. Yeah, Natalie said. Ariana was silent most of the time, only her friend was talking. The girl was so shy she couldn't get a word out. When the salads were on the table, the cocktails were here, too. Gob offered to toast them. They clinked their glasses together, and there was a deafening clink. Everyone drank a little. The atmosphere was very friendly. Gob began to tell them that he had graduated from high school 3 years ago, had gone to college, and was now nearing the end of his studies. So you have exams to take too? Ariana asked him. Of course, I have to write my final paper, he answered. They sat and chatted, happy with the company they were having today. When evening came, Ariana started to go home. Come on, let's go for another walk in the park, Gob asked her. It was still early. Natalie looked at her watch. It's early, but we have to study for the tickets, she said. Come on, I'll walk you out, the young man suggested. They went practically the whole way. Nobody said anything. When they reached Natasha's house, she said goodbye to everyone, and Gob and Ariana went on because her house was a few hundred meters farther away than Natasha's. Ariana, wait. Gob stopped her in the driveway. What? She looked at him. Shall we go for a little more walk or sit on the bench? He asked her. Gob, I told you I had to get ready. You're a lucky girl. Look at the handsome man paying attention to you. Yesterday, no matter how much I flirted, no matter how much I made eyes at him, he still paid attention to you. My friend wasn't jealous. It's just that if it had happened to her, she wouldn't have minded. So are you going out with me tonight? Ariana asked her. I don't know. If you call me, I'll go. Natalie was curious to see how the young people's relationship would continue. Well, then after school, we change clothes and immediately go for a walk, said the girl, because she realized that the evening time should be left for preparation. She hadn't done anything yesterday. When the lessons were over, the girls went home. As agreed, they had lunch, changed their clothes, and now Ariana waited for Natalie in the yard, and they went to the same park where they had been yesterday. Gob wasn't there, but no one was upset because they hadn't agreed on a specific time. And when about an hour had passed, they saw a guy coming toward them. Hi. They waved to him from the bench. Hi. He walked over and pulled one small rose from behind his back and handed it to Ariana. Thank you, she blushed. So, where are we going today? The young man asked them. Maybe to the amusement rides? Natalie suggested it. How about it? Gob looked at Ariana. I'm all for it, she said. They all got up together and headed to where the amusement park was. They had been on a lot of rides today, but when they got to the Ferris wheel, Ariana stepped back a little. What are you doing? Gob asked her. I'm not going. I'm scared, she said. Don't be afraid. I'll be right there holding your hand, he told her. Natalie had been watching them the whole time. She was so happy for her friend, and she wanted to meet the exact same guy to act the same way. Ariana got into the booth. She held on to Gob with both hands, her eyes closed because her fear was so strong that her heart was pounding in her chest, ready to jump out. When the wheel made a circle and they were on the ground, Ariana was shaking like a leaf. Gob pulled her against him, trying to calm her down. I think I should probably go home. But the summons came for the guy, and now he was going to go to the army. Honey, I love you so much. Ariana hugged him all the time. Sweetheart, 2 years will fly by quickly. I'll be back, he told her. Be sure to write to me every day, she asked him. I haven't gone anywhere yet. He kissed her. Such conversations continued until the send-off. And when everyone gathered at the guy's house, friends, relatives, everyone was there. Everyone was talking about something, laughing, and only Ariana didn't care about it. She was sad. The next day on the platform, she couldn't keep her eyes off him. I'll wait and write, she whispered in his ear and kissed him, kissed him, kissed him. I love you. He kissed her too and spoke back. The boy got on the train and went to the service. Friends dispersed from the platform, relatives too. Only Job's parents and Ariana remained. Daughter, don't forget about us. Come and visit, Naomi told her. If you let me, of course, I'll come by. It's not hard for me, Ariana said, wiping away her tears. Of course, come in. We are always happy to have guests, especially such, smiled sadly at her mother, because now she was not up to fun. Today, the girl came home. Her grandmother was waiting for her, made pies. They sat down to dinner. Studying continued. Ariana helped to do everything at home because her grandmother was already of age. She also went to see Gob's parents twice a week because she had promised them she would. Oh, Ariana, hi, come on in. Naomi opened the door for her, letting her into the apartment. At first, she walked in, they drank tea and talked. Ariana told her that Gob was writing to her, that she was writing to him. Afterward, she offered to help the woman wash the windows, floors, and do some other things around the house. Naomi didn't mind because her knees were very sore and she couldn't stand on her feet for long or climb high. Gob had been in the army for almost 8 months. During that time, Ariana had accumulated such a stack of letters that she didn't believe she could write so many. She had already practically finished 1 year of school. Now she was preparing for the summer session. One May day, she went once again to visit her lover's parents. She knocked on the door, and nobody opened it for a long time. She already thought that there was no one at home, wanted to leave, but then the door opened. On the threshold stood a young man. Hello, Ariana said to him. Hi, he smiled. I'm here to see Naomi, she said. And who are you? He looked at her. My name is Ariana. I'm Gob's girlfriend, she introduced herself. Wow, brother, when did you have time? Smirked the young man. What do you mean, brother? Ariana looked at him surprised. Neither Job nor his parents had ever said they had another son. I got back from the army the day before yesterday. I don't know why no one told you about me. He was surprised too. So Naomi, are you home or not? The girl was still standing outside the door. No, she and her father had gone to the country house. But you can come in. He let her in. Yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed. She didn't realize what she'd be doing here with her parents gone. Come on in. We'll sit, talk, get acquainted, he said. When the girl was already in the apartment, the young man invited her to the kitchen. There he poured tea, sat down opposite. So, my name is Steve, and as I said, I am Gob's older brother, he told her, and at the same time put sugar in the mug. Nice to meet you. You already know my name. She sat there looking at her mug, uncomfortable in front of the guy. She heard Naomi's voice from the hallway. She was glad that now it would be possible not to talk to Steve. The woman went into the kitchen. They were sitting there all together talking. Naturally, the girl did not ask Naomi anything about the fact that they had not told her anything about the young man before. After that, Ariana said goodbye and went home. And the next day something happened that she didn't expect at all. When she came out of the institute, Steve was waiting for her on the porch. Hi, he said to her and smiled. Hello, what are you doing here? She was surprised. What do you mean? Waiting for you, he said to her. Why? How did you know I was studying here? She had a lot of questions for him. Yes, simply, last night with Mother talked about you, so she told me they went down the street. I see. Well, thanks for meeting me. Ariana didn't know what else to say. Can I walk you home? Steve asked her. Steve, do you realize that I'm your little brother's girlfriend? How do you expect me to look him in the eye? She asked him. Well, what's the big brother taking care of the younger brother's girlfriend while he's away? He didn't understand. Well, okay, walk him out, she agreed. They walked to her house. She walked up the driveway and he stood there, watching and smiling. The next day, Ariana saw Steve again outside the institute. She walked up to him, didn't say anything, just walked past him. Ariana, hi, wait, walked, he followed her. Steve, why do you come every day? She didn't understand. Why shouldn't I? He caught up with her. Steve, she stopped, turned to him, stared, and was silent. Ariana, he too fell silent. They walked to her house in silence today. She walked into the entryway, didn't even say goodbye to him. The next day was a day off, and Ariana realized that he would not come to the institute today. Ariana, go to the store, her grandmother asked her. Yes, okay, she took the bag and the money and walked out of the entryway. Of course, she could expect it, that he would be waiting for her in the yard, but the girl hoped that it would not happen. And Steve was there. He was sitting on a bench, the same bench where she and Gob had talked earlier. She pretended not to notice him, walked past him. He followed her. Again today, in silence, they walked to the store and then came back. At the entrance, she turned to him. How long are you going to follow me? The girl asked. I'm not following you, he glared at her. Steve, how can you not understand? I love your brother, almost cried Ariana. You'll fall out of love. He spoke so confidently that the girl immediately became funny. What do you mean by that? She didn't understand. Ariana, I like you very much. I want to ask you out tomorrow, he said. I want to go out with you, she answered him. Why not? He didn't understand. Because I'm dating your brother, she told him. That's no reason at all, he told her. Ariana turned away from him. She went home, but Steve didn't give up his attempts to woo the girl. Every day he continued to meet her from the institute, gave flowers, complimented her, but he did not succeed. In the summer, a situation happened when, not of her own free will, Ariana had to stay with Steve. Girlfriends told her that mutual friends are organizing a picnic outside the city and invited her to go there. She was reluctant at first, but then thought she might go for a while. She was surprised to see Steve there. Oh wow, you're here. He was surprised too. Everyone scattered around the site, doing whatever they were doing. Some were grilling kebabs, some were sitting in the gazebo. Guys were playing guitar and singing songs. At first, everything was normal, but then the girls, who were friends with the guys, separated with them in quiet corners. 3 guys who were all sitting at the table drinking came up to Ariana. What are you missing? Said one of them. What makes you think that? I'm not bored, she told them. Let's go for a walk. One grabbed her arm. Let go, she said loudly. Yes, what are you breaking? Come with me, he told her. Please let me go, she looked him in the eye, but he yanked her so hard that Ariana almost fell. At that moment, Steve came up to them. Why are you picking on a girl? He asked the guy. What do you care? He replied, and tried to pull Ariana to him again. She looked at Steve so much that he went over and pushed the guy away and took the girl's hand. Do you want to fight? The young man asked him. I'll show you a fight right now. Steve wanted to just back away, but the guy turned him around and wanted to hit him. Steve prevented the punch and hit the guy hard in the jaw himself. A fight ensued, but Steve made quick work of all 3 of them. Let's get out of here, he said to Ariana, and when they were already in the car, she looked at him, thanking him for helping, and at the same time realizing if Steve hadn't been here, there was no telling what would have happened to her. He walked her home today and met her again the next day near the driveway. This time she talked to him. They went for a walk. Now that she was not angry with him, but on the contrary grateful, she realized that this was a wonderful young man. Now the guy came to her every day. He gave her flowers. They went for walks. He complimented her. He met her grandmother. Grandma appreciated him too. Ariana, do you realize what you're doing? She asked her in the evening. What am I doing? Her granddaughter asked her. You're dating his younger brother. When he comes back, how will you look him in the eyes? did not understand the woman's youthful mores. I don't think I love Gob anymore. I love Steve. Ariana was afraid to admit it to herself. Oh my God, what is it with young people? The woman sighed. Now Ariana, when she came to visit Naomi, she and Steve did not show that they were together at first. But the woman was not blind, and she had more experience. She noticed everything and was very upset about it. Steve, did you start dating Ariana? She asked him one day. Why does it bother you all so much? He looked at her. Don't you think you should write to your brother that this situation has come up? She asked him. Mom, what are you doing? He's in the army. Tell him now. God forbid, he'll do something to himself, the guy told her. Well, yes, you're right, agreed with him mother, but at the same time could not accept it. On New Year's Eve, Steve invited Maria and Ariana to their house. Oh, son, so I'm not going. I'm old. My legs do not walk, and I think God will be back soon, she told him. I told you all 1,000 times that when he gets back, I'll talk to him, her husband reassured her. Grandmother was getting worse every day. Her legs were failing, and she could only move around the apartment. Ariana helped with everything, even asked Steve to take her in for a while. But he said he was ready to visit her every day, to drive Ariana there, but he refused to live together. Every day her granddaughter was at her grandmother's house. She was afraid that the same thing might happen as with her mom. Grandma, how are you doing? She'd come to see her. Oh, granddaughter, how can they be? Nothing has changed. Everything hurts, she sighed. Maybe you should go to the hospital, the girl asked. What will they do there? The woman did not believe the doctors for a long time. By the end of the summer, the woman had just collapsed, so Ariana took her to the hospital. The woman spent 2 weeks there, and as she said, that didn't help her. Ariana started school again. She tried to get through her lectures and then returned home, afraid of missing the moment when her grandmother would be gone. Ariana, stay with me today, a woman asked her one day. Okay, the girl agreed, although she had never done so before. She called her husband and informed him that she would stay with her grandmother today. He understood everything, said nothing. They both felt it had to be done today, because the grandmother was gone at night. It was a blow to the girl. She had no one left at all now. When it was Maria's funeral, Ariana didn't think of anything at all. Steve did everything for her, helped her. His parents also got involved, and no one expected when they came home that on the same day Gob would return from the army. In the first year of service, the guy was very happy when he received almost everyday letters from his beloved. He would read them and immediately write a reply. Sometimes when he read a letter, he felt that Ariana was here with him. Then he noticed that the letters began to come less and less often. Had he not received a letter again today? His comrades asked him. No, he answered calmly. Well, you realize what it means, don't you? They told him. And what does it mean? He looked at a comrade with whom he had a very good relationship. Yes, she's found someone else, he laughed. No, Ariana is not like that. She promised to wait for me, the young man said naively. Yeah, they're all like that when they see us off in the army. When I was a civilian, a friend told me about going to the army, the friend started to say. And what did he tell you? Gob was curious. Friends with her for 2 years, at the send-off she cried, promised to wait, wrote letters about love, about feelings. And then one day, and that's it, he told him. What directly wrote in a letter that I no longer love you? Wondered Gob. No, just stop writing, and he himself guessed that they were no longer together, continued the friend to scare Gob. And then what happened? The guy looked at him. What if before he was a decent soldier, never rude to anyone, never did anything wrong, never violated, and then he began to be rude to officers? It is not known where he took, but he could drink in the wardroom. In the end, he was the last to be released to the civilian, his friend said. No, I will definitely not do that. But if she really left me, then from her side it would not be fair at all, because before she and I never had secrets from each other, he shared with his friend. But time passed, there were still no letters. Then Gob decided to write to his parents. He sat down at the table that same evening and began to compose a letter to his mother. He asked if she had seen Ariana, why she did not write to him, and in general, what was going on. When his mother received the letter, She decided not to say anything to anyone. She wrote to Gob that Ariana was no longer visiting them, and she hadn't seen her in a long time. That letter, when he got it, didn't sit well with him. He wanted clarity, and there was none. And so at last, when the service came to an end, he got on the train to go home. And there, under the clatter of the wheels, he pondered where he would go first, to his girlfriend or home. When he got off at the station, he decided that he would go in, leave his bags at home, and then go to Ariana. He went to the house. When he knocked on the apartment, no one opened it. The guy decided to wait. After a while, he saw his mother in a black scarf. Mom. He got up to meet her and hug her. What happened? Son, Gob's back. She hugged him. Tell me what happened. He was tense about her wearing the black shawl. Ariana's grandmother had died. There was nothing to hide, so she told him. Really, when? The guy was stunned. A few days ago, we buried her today, she mumbled to him. Well, let's go. I'll bring the bag. And immediately to her. Now Gob thought that she did not write to him because his grandmother was sick. She was ill, and Ariana was not up to letters. Gob, come on. We're going up to the house. I have something to tell you, Mom said to him, lowered her head and went into the entryway. Is something else wrong? He guessed. Come on, I'll tell you everything. She felt guilty in front of her son. Usually, when young men return from the army, they are welcomed. Mothers shed tears of joy. Girls rejoice, friends also. But today it was a bit awkward. They entered the apartment. The woman realized that her son might be hungry. She went straight to the kitchen, took food out of the refrigerator, began to heat it. Gob washed his hands, sat down at the table. Mom, do not languish. Talk already. He looked at his mother. She sat down at the table, folded her hands in front of her. Gob, Ariana is no longer with you, she told him. Well, that's about what I figured, he replied calmly. Gob, please don't get mad. Don't do anything stupid, Mom cried. I mean, that's not all the information. He didn't want any more. He couldn't understand how this humble and decent Ariana could do anything else. Yes, she wouldn't look at him because she was ashamed of her son, her daughter-in-law. So, what's next? He asked and didn't realize what could be worse than what his mother had just told him. Gob, promise me that you won't do anything stupid. Once again, the woman asked him. Mom. He couldn't stand the waiting any longer. Ariana got married, the woman said slowly. So what? You already told me she was with someone else. I wouldn't have done anything by now. And what's the big deal that she got married? Didn't understand the guy, because if two people are dating, it should end logically with a wedding. She married Steve, the mom said quickly and looked at her son. Which Steve? He stared at her. Ours. The woman couldn't stand it. I don't get it, your brother? He asked her. Yes, for your brother Steve. She shouted in her heart, jumped up from her chair, went to the window and turned away. Tell me their address. Steve glared at her. His fists clenched, his face white. He sat panting like a bull. My boy, please don't do anything. Let them live. Leave them alone. You're young, handsome. You'll find another girl, she said. I say, I need an address. Maybe I just want to visit my brother. He got up from the table and looked at the woman. But I know. The mother fell silent. She realized she had done something stupid herself. Steve had told her that he would talk to his brother and tell him everything himself. But sooner or later, Gob would still find out their address. So his mother told him his. At the same moment, the boy ran out of the apartment. Now, if his brother met him on the way, he would just kill him. He was there in a few minutes. Open up. He banged on the door, but no one came out. The entryway was so quiet that Gob felt like he was silencing himself. Steve, I know you're home. Open up. Gob continued to shout at the landing. Wait, he heard through the door, footsteps approaching. The door swung open. On the threshold stood his brother, and behind him stood Ariana. What, are you going to let me in the house? Gob asked with a smirk. Come on in, Steve answered him. The young man entered. He walked through, first into the kitchen, then into the room, looking around. Yes, I see you've settled in well. What, you fell for the apartment or what? He looked at the girl. Steve, I'll explain everything to you now, she started. No, I'll explain it myself. Her husband stopped her. Well, try, said the guy, and went to the kitchen. Please, love, go to the room. I'll talk to him now and we'll work it out, said Steve to Ariana, and went to the kitchen too. She went to the room, sat down on the bed, and started listening to what was going on in the kitchen. Well, brother, not enough for you what we had in childhood. We have not communicated with you for so many years, and now you decided to spite me, steal my fee and stay from me, asked him Gob. What are you talking about? She just happened to be visiting her parents. Believe me, she didn't want to date me or go out with me or anything. No matter how many times I went after her, no matter how much I insisted, she rejected me, said she loved you. But there was an incident where I happened to save her. Steve was silent. He looked at his brother. Got anything to drink? He asked. You're not a drinker, his brother told him. I wasn't, but now I am. Gob answered him rudely. Understand, we have love. We have a family. She loves me and I love her. Steve now realized how difficult it was to choose words when he was sitting across from his brother. Before, when he thought he was going to talk to him, he knew exactly what he was going to say, how he was going to say it. But for some reason, it wasn't working now. You're saying we weren't in love, aren't you? Gob looked at him. You were young. She was in school. Maybe it was adolescent maximalism. And she thought she loved you. Steve realized that he could use a drink now too. He got up, went to the cupboard, took out a bottle of hot liquor, 2 shots, put them on the table, poured. Well, come on, brother, to your happiness, and looked at him with hatred, younger brother. Why are you like that? They drank. For a few minutes, there was complete silence in the kitchen. What about you? If she told you that she was my girlfriend, how could you do that? Gob started this conversation again. Did you come to punch me in the face? Steve asked him directly. To be honest, yes, Gob told him. So go ahead. Here it is, me. Punch it. Maybe it'll make you feel better. His brother brought his face closer to him. Call her here. Let her come. I want to look her in the eye. Gob didn't even ask, he insisted. No, I won't let anyone hurt her. And if you have anything to say about her, tell me, I'll listen. Steve would never hurt Ariana. Pour, Gob asked. Maybe that's enough. Steve took up the bottle, but took his time pouring. I said, pour it. I've got nothing left to lose. It was the love of my life, and you took it away from me. He was so angry, but for some reason he couldn't do anything about it. Steve poured, and then another and another. Ariana was almost asleep in the room. She was tired of listening to these conversations. She just made the bed and lay down. The young men were already very drunk. Gob, please go home. Tomorrow we'll go to your parents and discuss everything, Steve told him, tongue lashing. Yes, I'll leave now, but know that you won't be happy with this woman because you can't build happiness on someone else's misfortune. He staggered out into the hallway, put on his sneakers, and left the apartment. Gob walked home. Now he wanted only one thing: to go somewhere else, to drink more, to forget himself, to remember nothing at all, and to get this girl out of his head. Steve came into the room. He lay down next to Ariana. She woke up from it. So what did he say? She asked him. Nothing much. Yes, he's mad at me, at you. But I think that anger will pass soon. He's a young, good-looking guy. He'll find a girl. He was sure of it, the young man. Steve called Ariana to his parents' house that morning, but she refused because she realized that Gob would be there, and she couldn't look him in the eye after what she'd done. But even now, when she was alone, she thought about it, and she realized that if the question of which brother to choose now came up, she wouldn't be able to give an answer. And not because she was ashamed in front of Gob, but because she loved them both like a girl. Please don't drink, his mother told him when she saw Gob sitting in the kitchen this morning, pouring himself another drink. Mother, give me a break. I just got back from the army. I have a right, he answered her, and poured himself another drink. Mom realized that this would not end well, so she tried all the time to be near and support, but it only annoyed the guy. After 2 weeks of unrestrained drinking, Gob collected his bag. He went out into the hallway, began to dress. Son, where are you going? His mother asked him. Mom, you know how much it hurts me that you all betrayed me. I wrote to you. Why couldn't you answer me? Maybe I would have prepared myself mentally and I wouldn't be like this now. He smirked, threw his bag on his shoulder, opened the door, walked out. Are you coming back? His mother looked after him. I think not, he answered her, laughed, and went further downstairs. "Steve, why don't you come to us?" Naomi cried and called her eldest son. "Mom, Ariana doesn't want to because Gob is there. He wouldn't lie to her." "He's gone," the woman sobbed. "Gone where?" Steve didn't understand. "I don't know. He packed a bag and left." "Please come, at least we'll talk to you," she told him. Ariana didn't resist now. They packed up and went to visit the woman. She sat at the table and sobbed. She realized that she could not tear herself between her sons. She cared for them both. "Naomi, don't be so upset." The girl pitied her. "Yes, how can I not be upset? I understand everything. I love both of them. I don't know how it could happen," she said in a quiet voice. "Mom, I promise you that I will find him and nothing will happen to him." Steve got up from the table. "What on earth is going on?" Naomi cried again. That evening, Steve and Ariana went home and he asked her one thing, to forget the whole story. And if she really loves him and really treats him well, she will forget everything and think only about her family. "Right?" Steve asked her. Of course she did. She hugged him and pressed herself against his chest. After that, they continued to live together. The story with Gob seemed to be forgotten. He called his mother at some point and told her that he had gotten a good job and he was getting paid, but it was far away. Steve and Ariana continued to live together. He was working as an ordinary office worker, but he wanted to get a better job. At some point, he got a call saying that the resume he had submitted had gone through and they were waiting for an interview. "Ariana, can you believe it? I'm going to be interviewed at that firm I told you about," he told her. "Oh yes, the one you dreamed about," she remembered. "Yes," he replied. She was happy for her husband because she knew he had been dreaming of that position for a very long time. He had submitted resumes several times but didn't get through because the staff was full and no one was needed. Now he got a call telling him to come in. Steve didn't put it off because there was a possibility that someone else would be invited and he wouldn't pass. The day after the call, he went to the interview. Everything went perfectly. Even though he was told that we would call you back, he knew for sure that he had already been hired by the company. Just as he thought he would, it turned out that way. 2 days later, they called him back and told him to get a physical exam, and then he could go to work. Steve didn't hesitate for a minute. He had quit his last job, and now he was sitting in the corridors of the clinic, taking tests and everything else, getting ready for his new work routine. "I'm so happy for you," Ariana told him at home. She continued to study. Her husband told her that she could not work anywhere, so she cooked, cozied up, and everything else. "Oh, my love, if everything works out, we'll have everything with you. I'll build the house I've been dreaming of for so long." It seemed like he was feeding her promises, but he believed it and trusted that it would work out. When the physical was passed, he came in with all the paperwork and he was indeed employed. In the first few days, things didn't go the way Steve thought they would. He had to learn from new friends, colleagues. But soon he mastered everything. Now he already knew and could do a lot of things. When he got his first paycheck, he went to the store after work. There he bought wine, cake, and many other things to prepare dinner. He came home. "Wow, that's a lot of packages." Ariana looked at him. "Yes, I had my first paycheck today and I decided to have a celebratory dinner for us," he replied. Steve put wine, cake, and the rest of the groceries on the table. "Let's cook together," his wife suggested it. Of course, his favorite, he always called her only that. He peeled the potatoes, she cut the meat. After that, they put the tray in the oven. Ariana couldn't believe that this was really happening in her life. After all, everything was so good that it even seemed unreal. When everything was ready, the young family sat down at the table. Steve filled their glasses and of course, Ariana's first toast was to him. That he was such a driven, punchy man. Yeah, he agreed with her. "Why are you smiling like that?" She didn't understand and laughed too. "If he wasn't, this beautiful girl wouldn't be sitting at the table with me right now." Steve took her hand. She let him know that he reminded her of that story with Gob again. That's it. I'll be quiet." He put his hands out in front of him. That evening went very beautifully and romantically. They drank a little, talked, discussed all kinds of things. "Did you really tell the truth about the house?" She reminded him that he had promised her. "Yes, I've wanted to have a house since I was a kid, to live there with my family, and I'm sure it's all ahead of me." They drank again. "I believe in you. You will succeed. Whatever you set your mind to, it will all come true, Ariana told him. They sat for a while longer and went to bed. Steve continued to work. The pay was very good, plus they got monthly bonuses, and at the end of the year they gave him an annual bonus. He knew that, which is why he was eager to get a job here. And when, after a year and a half of work in the organization, he told Ariana that he had bought a plot at a very good price, she rejoiced and hugged her husband. "Wow, what a great job you did. I knew you would do well," she told him. Steve called his friends, also hired workers, helped himself, and when there was free time, they were always lost at the construction site. "Darling, you're never home," Ariana told him. "Darling, do you want to live in your own house?" he asked her. "Of course I do," she smiled at him. "Well, then wait a little while and everything will be fine." He hugged her because he loved her very much and wanted to do everything to make her smile. 6 months passed. The house was almost completely built. It couldn't help but make everyone happy. And now that there wasn't much left to do, Steve relaxed a bit and started to be home more often. "Ariana, it's your birthday in a week. Where would you like to celebrate it?" he asked his wife. "I don't even know. I haven't thought about it." She looked at him. "Well, I will not spare any money for my beloved. You want a restaurant? You want something else?" He shrugged. "Why don't we go on vacation for a week?" she asked him. "Yes, a vacation is a good idea," he agreed with her. And a week later, when Ariana's birthday was 2 days away, the young family went on a trip. "You have no idea how much I love you," Ariana told him. "Beloved, everything is for you," he told her. He only took 5 days off, so it was a small but very romantic vacation. And when they got home, Steve announced to his wife that he had another present for her. He invited her to a restaurant. When she arrived, there was a table set up, and again romance, speeches about love, champagne. "Well, what did you want to give me? What kind of surprise?" She knew that Steve liked to give jewelry, especially fine jewelry he sometimes ordered individually. And then he'd give it to her, maybe even just for fun on a normal day. And now she was expecting something unusual, like a bracelet or a necklace in the shape of a snake, for example. "Can I blindfold you?" he asked her. Of course, she didn't understand why, and when it was done, he took her hand and led her. Ariana realized that they were leaving the restaurant, but where they were going and why was unclear. When they went down the 2 steps, her husband led her, but it wasn't that far because they only walked about 15 meters. "Open up," he said to her. Ariana took off her blindfold, and in front of her stood a car with a big pink bow on the roof. "What is it?" she said with surprise. "Don't you see a car?" Steve realized she was in shock. "Darling, I can't drive." She turned to him. "So what? There's no problem. You'll get in. You'll pass the license, but you already have a car," he told her. "Yay, yay, hooray!" She could be happy and clapped her hands. After that, the girl sat behind the wheel of a new car, tried how it was. "Well, how comfortable?" her husband asked her. "Very comfortable, thank you. I never imagined that I would have a car." She could not believe her happiness. "It's okay. We'll be living out of town soon and you'll need it," Steve said. "Love," she hung around his neck again. "That's it. Let's go celebrate." He took her back to the restaurant. Afterward, they called a car and drove home. The gift also went after them because Steve had asked a special person to help him move the car away from the restaurant. The construction continued, but now they still had to finish everything inside. But that was a secondary matter. The main thing was that the house was ready, and now Ariana was choosing the color of wallpaper. They had even planned a nursery, even though they didn't know when they would have children. "Darling, are you happy?" her husband asked her. "Of course. What do you think?" She looked at it all and believed that he was doing it for her. Perhaps he was. The repairs continued. Ariana didn't do it with her own hands, but she chose every little detail herself. The wallpaper, the flooring, the kitchen. All the colors were chosen according to her wishes. And then the best part began. Furniture had to be bought, curtains and everything else. And here Steve simply told her that it's your will. What you want, you do. This was something the girl was really looking forward to. Besides applying to driving school, now she was also designing her house, and it was really interesting because she had never done that before. And now she had put her whole soul into this house. It was just the way she wanted it done. Boy, I didn't know my wife was a great designer. Every time I came in, and I was amazed, Steve, at what she had done. It really was cozy, comfortable, and every little detail was important. If it was a low, wide windowsill, she put a little mattress, pillows, and made everything into a little sofa. You could get cozy there, read a book or something. If it was the kitchen, there were flowers everywhere, either in pots or in vases. She could even buy them for herself, but only to have them in her kitchen. Jars, containers, everything was color coordinated, level. No one would ever say it was done by an ordinary person. "You're my good girl." Steve hugged her, and she was glad of that praise, because she didn't need more than that. Now they were already living in the house. Everything was cozy, comfortable. Husband and wife were happy that they did it all themselves. He built it, she furnished it. One day Steve's phone rang. He looked at Ariana. "Who is it?" she asked quietly. "Mom," he answered. "So why aren't you answering?" She was surprised. Now he picked up the phone, and he didn't think Naomi would say anything nice to him. "Hello, son." He heard in the receiver instead of greeting. Steve heard his mom sobbing. What happened? He didn't understand. "Please come urgently with Ariana to my place," she was saying. "Can't you tell me what happened?" He clarified, because it was very late and they had to go to work tomorrow. "If it wasn't urgent, I wouldn't be calling you right now," the mother said, and she couldn't help but sob. Steve hung up the phone. He looked at Ariana, wondering whether or not to take her with him. "What?" She looked frightened at him. "I don't know. Mom is crying and sobbing and asking us to come to her right now," he said. "So what are we waiting for? Get ready. Let's go," she muttered. They quickly got ready, got in the car, and drove to the woman's house. Literally in half an hour they were at her place. Quickly they went up to the floor. Steve ran into the apartment. The mother was sitting in the hallway on a small chair. She had her hands over her face and was just sobbing profusely. "Mom, Mommy, what happened?" Steve came up to her without taking off his shoes. "Gob, Gob," she couldn't speak, choking on her sobs. "I don't understand anything." He took her by the shoulders and tried to calm her down. Dad came out of the room. He usually didn't interfere in any family conversations. He didn't talk to anyone. He didn't give advice to anyone. He was a quiet and malleable man. "Papa, can you at least explain to me what happened?" Steve turned to him for the first time for a question. "A telegram came an hour ago," the man said calmly. "And what did it say?" His son looked at him. At this time, Ariana went over to Naomi and began to comfort and hug her. "It said that our son had died," the father answered him. "Died how?" Steve looked at Ariana. Naturally, she had heard everything too, and now, along with her mother, she was just sitting there crying quietly. "I called his friend," Naomi began to say. "And what did he tell you?" Steve wanted clarity. Gob had gotten a job on a drilling rig, and when they were drilling another well, gas started coming out. The preventer was malfunctioning, and there was a huge explosion. She said of what she'd heard from the fellow who'd sent the telegram and left his phone number there. "Jesus," exhaled Ariana. "Don't worry, it's all right." Now it was not only the mother who needed to be reassured, but his wife as well. "There are drops in there," his father told him and walked back into the room. Steve quickly took the drops, poured 2 glasses of water, dribbled some, and gave it to his wife and mother. It was very sad. It was impossible to take such news, and even more so because of the fact that there would be no body. Everything was happening on the river bank. 8 people died, some were thrown to the other side, and some were thrown into the river and carried away by the current. Apparently Gob was one of them. Now it was a shared grief that had to be shared. "Mom, Dad, let's go to our place. We have more room. You can stay with us for a while," Steve suggested. "Thanks, son. We can manage here," the woman replied. Today, Steve and Ariana stay at his parents' house because they understood how badly his mother was feeling. When Ariana went to the kitchen in the morning, her mother had prepared some light breakfast, sat at the table, and cried again. "Naomi, since we don't have a body, let's collect everything Gob loved. We'll take a picture, his favorite things, and just make a grave in the cemetery, because we have to go out and mourn him," Ariana suggested. "Yeah, that's probably what we'll do." The woman agreed with her. The woman agreed with her. The woman agreed with her. Steve helped his wife and mother with everything. It didn't matter how he felt about his brother, but it was his blood. He did everything to calm their tense nerves. Steve didn't want his two favorite women to cry. But the young men's lives went on. They needed to go about their work, their business. Not a few weeks later, Steve and Ariana were back in their home, doing business as usual. "So how's your driving going?" Steve asked her. "Oh, our instructor's not like that," Ariana told him. "What do you mean different?" Steve didn't understand her. "I don't know. I don't understand a lot of things," the girl frowned. "Do you want me to help you?" he asked her. "I do," she replied. And now they often sat at the computer, solving the tickets that were to pass. This could not but please the girl. "Here, now that you explained, I understand everything," she said to him. "Well, so professional." He lifted his chin up, showing her that he was proud of himself. When the girl started her driving test, at first she was scared and it seemed difficult, but after sorting out all the tickets with her husband, she really understood everything. And when the X day came, she passed the theory. Well, Steve was waiting for her. "I passed." Ariana rejoiced and jumped up and down. "Wait, theory is one thing, but practice is another," he told her. "Are you doubting me?" She looked at him. "Of course not. It's just that we need to practice on our car," he told her when they got to their house. Then, without putting all this off, Steve put his wife behind the wheel, sat beside her himself, and helped her. She seemed to be able to handle everything, so Ariana wasn't afraid of the exams at all. And when the day and hour was set, she went there and was ready for anything. "May I?" she asked the instructor. "Sure, have a seat," he invited her. She sat down, put her feet closer to the pedals, put her hands on the steering wheel. She felt a shiver go through her inside, but the girl tried to deal with it. The instructor was saying something, but Ariana knew what she had to do. She drove, and when eventually he said to pull to the side of the road, she did so, looked at him and waited for him to tell her what mistakes she had made. "I congratulate you, you passed," he told her. "Can I give you a hug?" The girl couldn't contain her emotions. Of course they hugged. Ariana got out of the car. Her husband followed her to where she told him to go. When she got into the car, he immediately, by her satisfied look, saw that everything went perfectly. "Well, are you to be congratulated?" he asked her. Yes, she was smiling. The girl didn't understand why she couldn't do that before. And now, Ariana drove the car only in the area where their house was located. She didn't dare to go into the city yet because she was a little afraid. She needed practice. "Ariana, hi, it's been ages," Natalie called her. "Oh, my friend, hi, where have you been so long?" "I'm always at home. I come to visit. We could sit and talk," she answered her. "No, we are not majors. We don't live rich, so come to me today," the girl called her. "Where to?" Ariana answered. She wanted to meet her friend. "Do you remember the house in the village, almost right outside the city?" Natalie told her. "Of course I remember. How could I forget it?" Smiled Ariana and remembered her childhood, how she and Natalie used to go there. Somebody they knew would give them a ride or they'd take the shuttle bus. "So we're going to be there. Almost half the class is coming," Natalie told her. "I'm definitely coming with you." She was sure her husband would let her go, and there was nothing else holding her back. That evening she sat at home, waiting for Steve to come home from work, and when he came, she immediately decided to talk to him. "Honey, the girls invited me to a get-together. You won't mind if I go, will you?" she asked him. "What girls?" He was curious. "Natalie, remember her?" She answered. "Oh, of course I remember her. How could you forget her?" He smiled. So, she waited for his decision. "Yes, of course I'll let you go. When have I ever forbidden you anything? Just be careful, and if anything bad happens, call right away or just come home," he told her. "You're acting like my grandmother," she looked up at him. "Ariana, I love you so much that if something happens, I won't be able to forgive myself." He put the keys on the nightstand and went to the kitchen. "Why are you changing?" Ariana asked her husband. "Don't you need a ride?" He was surprised. "I can drive myself." She rolled her eyes. "Just a few weeks behind the wheel and you're already independent." Steve pretended to be offended. "Please don't be offended. It's not that far. I'm very careful," she told him. "Well, okay. Just promise me that you will not exceed the speed limit, that you will not overtake anyone, and for God's sake, Just do not drink. If you sit drunk behind the wheel, then he stopped talking and looked at her, and over his shoulder, hugged his wife. Ariana was unspeakably pleased. Not only would she be going to meet her girlfriends, whom she hadn't seen in so long, but she'd be driving her own car. She'll tell the girls that her husband gave her the car. They'll be jealous. Her phone rang again, and it was Natalie again. "Yeah, Natalie, hi," she told her. "Listen, how are you going to get there?" her friend asked. "By car," Ariana answered. "Can't you bring a couple more people? It's just expensive to take a cab," her friend asked her. Of course, Ariana was fine with that. So she got into her car that evening and drove to where two more girls were waiting for her. They got in the back seat, and now they were heading to where the party was to be held. "Are you going to spend the night there?" the passengers asked Ariana. "I don't know. What makes you think that?" she asked. "Well, it's just that you're driving, and there will be alcohol there anyway," they told her. "Oh, girls, I'm indifferent to it," she answered them honestly. "I see." They laughed in the back seat. They drove on in silence. Ariana was focused on the road, and then in the distance, the very house they needed to arrive at showed up. They got out of the car. Ariana put it in the right place, and they walked into the yard. Everyone was very excited to meet each other. There were only two boys. They walked in where a fire had been built. The meat was marinated. All that was left was to put it on skewers and cook it. The girls were circling the table, making salads and appetizers, canapes, and everything else. Natalie ran up to her and gave her a hug. "Shit, friend, why haven't we seen you for so long? We live in the same city, right?" "Oh, you and your love stories, you've lost your way," Natalie reproached her. "I promise you that we will see each other more often," Ariana tried to promise her. "I'll take you at your word," her friend told her. "Madam," a young man came up to her and held out a glass with a pink liquid. "Very high. What's this?" Ariana asked him. "A cocktail for a beautiful girl," he replied. "With alcohol?" she clarified. "Oh, it's only 30 grams, he told her. "So what? I'm driving," answered his classmate. "Ariana, it's only the beginning of the evening. In 2 hours you won't have anything in your system," he assured her. "All right, I'll take your word for it," she told him and sipped from her pipe. It was fun. The guys were talking about who had settled down, who was studying where, who was working where. Ariana drank one cocktail. Barry then brought her a second, a third. She was already feeling so good that she didn't notice anything or anyone around her. It was 6 o'clock in the morning when the girls Ariana had come with started to go home. "What are you guys driving?" Ariana asked them. "We thought you were going to drive us in back. That's what you told your husband? You were in a hurry to get home, so we thought." They stood beside her. "Shit, guys, I'd already had a drink," said the girl. "Oh, when was that?" Barry came up to them and started teaching Ariana about life again. "What? You think if they stop you, they won't catch you?" she asked him. "I'm telling you, there were 2 drops. Did you feel anything?" he asked her. No, and that was true, because Ariana really didn't feel any alcohol in those cocktails. That was it. Barry actually had a very different agenda. He wanted to get the girl drunk and then seduce her. That's why there weren't 2 drops in those cocktails like he said, but a lot more. Ariana walked over to Natalie. She said goodbye to her, walked out the gate, and got behind the wheel. Now she felt the kind of uncertainty in herself, but still the vapors of alcohol were making themselves known. And the girl confidently pressed the gas pedal. They drove forward. There was no one on the highway, and when they almost approached the city, Ariana became bolder. She pressed the gas pedal, increased speed. There was a truck in front of her, so she went to overtake. Ariana turned on her turn signal, swerved. She didn't slow down at all. Suddenly, a car appeared on the opposite side of the road. A hard impact, and then darkness. What and how it was, Ariana does not remember, does not know, and in general, there are no memories about it. She opened her eyes and saw a white ceiling. She wanted to turn her head, but she couldn't move. "Drink," she whispered, but apparently no one heard her because the room was empty. Ariana lay there. She tried to remember her name, who raised her, who her parents were, and everything else. All of this she knew, so she realized her memory wasn't gone. But what was it? Why couldn't she do anything about it? Initially, the girl thought that she was just in shock, and she hadn't yet recovered from that state. Now a little time would pass, she would recover, and everything would recover. The next moment, she began to think that she was brought after the accident, had an operation, and now she had not yet recovered from the anesthesia. But it was useless to guess. It was better to ask the doctor. A young girl came into the room. Ariana repeated to her that she was thirsty. The girl did everything for her, immediately went out into the corridor, and called the doctor. The next moment, a man in a white coat entered the office. "Hello, Ariana. My name is Billy. I am your attending physician," he muttered. "What's wrong with me?" she asked him. "Apart from the many fractures you have on your body, the most complicated one is the rupture of your spinal cord," he told her. "Am I not going to walk again?" She looked at the doctor questioningly. "I can't answer that question for you right now. You have a lot of surgeries, rehabilitation centers, and everything else ahead of you. Is there anyone who can help you?" he asked her. "Of course there is." Ariana immediately thought of Steve. And anyway, why isn't he here right now? But by evening, the young man appeared. He walked into the ward. She saw that he was crying. Steve was adjusting her blanket and pillow, talking on some distant topics. At this point, Ariana realized that he knew the truth, but he wasn't telling her, just trying to distract her. "Steve, do you know something?" she asked him. "Ariana, everything is going to be okay," he told her. After a few weeks in the hospital, it was decided that she should be sent to a more qualified clinic. Now she and her husband were flying to the capital, where she was to be examined. And then from the internet and from acquaintances, Steve learned about the Elizarov Center, where people are collected almost in pieces. He called there, made an appointment, and when they arrived, Ariana was back in the hospital room. "Ariana, don't worry, you'll be fine," her husband told her. She didn't believe him, because at that moment she couldn't move her arms, legs, or head. She could only look with her eyes. And it was all so terrible. It was such a blow that she couldn't even think about it. At night, when she was alone, she began to pray. Ariana apologized to everyone for doing such a stupid thing. Now she realized that there must have been a lot of alcohol in that cocktail. One day she picked up the phone. Her fingers wouldn't listen. Her hands were falling. With 2 hands holding it, she dialed her husband's number. "Hello," he answered her. "Steve, please come to my room," she asked him. Of course, he had a displeased look on his face, but he came. "You understand, I'm lying here. No one needs me, and you bring mistresses into the house already just. Free me from this," she begged him. "And what do you want me to do? Throw you out on the street to be judged by all the people?" He looked at her. Yes, he realized that he loved this woman very much, but right now he didn't have the strength to care for her. She needed to be turned over because Betzers could develop. But lately Steve had been so involved with his girlfriends that he had forgotten about it. And the nurse alone couldn't do it. She asked him for help, and he promised to come, but he never did. "But at least you put her in a chair and take her outside," the aide told him when she already realized it was the end. Steve put Ariana in the chair. He carried her out into the yard, and then when he heard a car pull up to the house, he didn't have time to get the stroller into the house. Then he stood behind Ariana's chair, opened the gate in the barn, and took her in. The girl stayed with him for 3 hours, then went home, and he returned Ariana to her room. "So how many do you have?" she shouted at him. "Ariana, please, it's not your problem now," he told her calmly. "If you bring your mistress again, I will shout so that she knows, so that everyone knows what you have going on here." She could have called the various services long ago, but she felt sorry for him. She didn't want to set him up, and she felt sorry for herself, that she was infirm and couldn't do anything. Once again, a car pulled up in front of the house. Steve looked out the window, smiled. Ariana was sitting here on the first floor in a wheelchair. "So my dear, it's time for a walk," Steve said to her. He took her out into the yard, and again, according to the planned scheme, opened the shed, and rolled her in, slightly covered the sashes. He himself returned home, met his guest, and they did who knows what in the house. But for some reason, Steve didn't come for his wife in the evening. Apparently, the mistress had decided to stay the night. Ariana sat in the chair. She was freezing. She had nothing with her. The girl was hungry. She was thirsty. She was freezing. And now she realized that no one needs sick people. Suddenly, the gate opened and a young man walked in. Ariana heard the fence rattle and tried to look out through the gap that was left in the unclosed doors. She saw him, but didn't realize who it was. And then the guest saw the dog barking at him, made the kind of gesture that only Gob did. "Gob?" said Ariana quietly at first. She just didn't believe it could be him, but she saw the guy stop. "Gob," he shouted to him. "Where are you?" He recognized her voice immediately. "Gob, I'm here in the barn," Ariana shouted to him. It was already night outside, and she didn't understand why he had come. Gob went to the voice. There was darkness all around. He lit himself up with his cell phone, and he couldn't believe his eyes. "Ariana, what's wrong with you?" He didn't understand. "It's a long story," she cried, and she would have loved to cuddle up to him, but she couldn't because he was standing very far away. Well, briefly at least, he wanted to hear it. "You see, Steve gave me the car," and she told him everything until now. "Do you know why I'm here now?" Ariana hadn't seen him until now. He was in the dark. She only recognized him by the outline of his figure and his voice. "Of course not," she answered. "Look, he devoted himself to the flashlights from the telephone. His whole face and neck were scarred from burns." "Have you been to your mother's?" The first thing she asked him. "You've always been like that. You take care of others first and then yourself." "No, I haven't been to my mother's. I just don't know how I survived. I washed up on the other side of the river. I don't know how long I was there. I was picked up by the locals, dragged to their place, and a woman treated me for a long time with various herbs, some local incantations. And here I am, in front of you, alive. And now that I was able to get out of there, able to get up, able to stand on my feet, I decided that I would just kill my brother. I don't care if I go to jail. What matters to me is that I loved you very much. I know that you loved me too, and maybe you still do, but it's just that my brother spoke to you, took something from you. You missed tenderness and affection and everything else, and you gave in, and then you couldn't back out." He said all that and got down on his knees in front of her. "Gob, what are you doing?" she asked him, realizing he was telling the truth. "Ariana, I'm sorry for everything I said to you then. I really don't think so." He took her hands in his. "Take me away from here," she begged. "First, I want to get back at him, my brother." Gob sat in front of her. They could only see the outline of each other, but that was enough. "If you take me away from here, you'll get revenge on him. Believe me." She knew what she was saying. And then Gob did, indeed, take the stroller, dragged Ariana to the car, put the stroller in the trunk. And they drove away, decided not to come back for a while, so no one would know where they were or what they were doing. Steve spent the night in bed with his mistress. He didn't even think how his wife was, that she was cold, that she was sick or something else. In the morning, while his new lover slept in bed, he decided he needed to feed Ariana. He still had some feelings for her. He went and got something from the fridge and went to the barn. When he opened it to feed his wife breakfast, he froze. The shed was empty. "Ariana, where are you?" he shouted, but realized it was a stupid idea because she couldn't move, not her arms, not her legs, nothing moved. Even if she fell off the chair, she wouldn't be able to crawl out of here. Well, all right, even if she crawled away, then where was the chair? It was all a mystery to him. He didn't understand. God brought Ariana to the city. Now she just exhaled because she was free. She realized that they could safely go to her apartment now, so she suggested it to him. He had agreed. The young men got there, made themselves comfortable. He did whatever the girl asked him to do. "And when do you think you'll tell your relatives?" she asked him. "I don't even know," he answered. "Do you know how Naomi is suffering?" Ariana was worried about her. "Why hasn't she helped you?" he asked her back. "She just doesn't know what's going on. Steve says everything is fine, and she believes him," the girl told him. For two, Gob had thrown everything he had into recovering the girl. While she was in rehab, he filed for divorce on her behalf, which she signed. They were divorced, and the first time she was put on an exercise machine to start getting up, he proposed. "Gob, I can't say yes to you. I'm so ashamed," the girl told him. "What is there to be ashamed of because we love each other?" he replied. "I know everything. Why you were with Steve, how you were with Steve, He didn't plead with her. If she said no now, he wouldn't come near her again. Now I actually realized who was a real person and friend and who wasn't. She reached out to him and put her hands on his shoulders. So, will you marry me? He asked her. The young man had loved her all these years. He had been through and experienced so much, and now he couldn't miss this chance. Why do you need a cripple? She lowered her eyes. Ariana had always realized that she herself was to blame for what happened to her, so now she felt even worse than before. Who is an invalid? You are the healthiest person in the world. I love you so much. I will do anything to make you healthy, he promised the girl. I have to think about it, Ariana answered him. To be honest, she wasn't going to do it, but she had to take her time. Steve, when he found out that Ariana was taken away by his younger brother, he even exhaled. And when his mother told him that what he did was wrong, he just laughed in her face and said that he wasn't hired to pick up invalids. Ariana finally said yes to Gob. They started living together in the apartment where her grandmother lived. They were doing well. Are we getting married? Gob asked her one day. But what about me in a wheelchair? She asked him. What's the big deal? He didn't understand. It had been a year since he'd taken her out of that barn. Her arms were starting to move, even better. She could sit up confidently, already leaning on her elbows, able to pull herself up on a chair and transfer to another seat. Now that they had purchased a special exercise machine that lifted her out of bed, she could exercise, even walk. God was sure she would walk again. Their wedding had been modest, not like the one with Steve, but somehow this wedding was happier for the girl than the first one. She continued to study hard. God was supportive. He worked one job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, doing whatever it took to make money for his family. They traveled to surgeons. Ariana had surgeries. She had a titanium bridge put in, and now she was able to stay on her feet with the help of a walker, but she still needed support. It was 2 years after their wedding. Naomi came to visit them. She said hello to Naomi. Hunter smiled. And you look really good, she told her. Job sat down next to his wife, Hunter. Mom sat across from her children. And even if one had these injuries, the other had others, but they were happy. I have news for you, Ariana told her. What news? They were both surprised because she never left the house without them. You will soon become a grandmother and you will become a daddy. She looked at her beloved husband and put his hand on her stomach.